Chapter 1378. Inside the main cabin, a tall young man wearing a white robe and silver armor slowly walked out while leading a white horse. It was Zhao Yun. Zhao Yun's complexion was not very good, and there was not much of a smile on his face. He looked at Bai Xiaowen and asked, "Is this a promise?" Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "Yes." Zhao Yun's stiff face became more lively. He raised his spear and mounted the horse. "Who is it?" Bai Xiaowen pointed at Sun Tzu. Zhao Yun's legs squeezed the horse's belly. The Jade Night Lion let out a long neigh and jumped down from the ship. As if it had wings, it jumped down to the battlefield below and went straight to Sun Tzu. Along the way, there were Jiangdong soldiers blocking his path. Zhao Yun raised his spear, grabbed, blocked, whipped, and flicked. None of the Jiangdong soldiers were his match. He was like a fast boat cutting through the waves. However, it was clear that Zhao Yun did not use too much force. Otherwise, the Jiangdong soldiers would not have fallen to the ground. Instead, they would have been cut down like wheat. Sun Tzu was stunned. He could feel that Zhao Yun was coming for him. Sun Tzu recognized Zhao Yun. During the fight for Jingzhou, he had seen Zhao Yun's heroic figure on the battlefield. However, they did not fight. "Zhao Zilong. Are you also a national traitor? Have you forgotten who killed Liu Bei?" Sun Tzu shouted. However, Zhao Yun turned a deaf ear and rode his horse in front of Sun Tzu. The tip of his spear trembled like flying pear blossoms in snow. Sun Tzu roared and raised his spear to meet Zhao Yun. In terms of strength, both of them were first-class Lord-class generals. Zhao Yun's martial arts were slightly better, but Sun Tzu had the special skill, Torrent. It was enough to offset this difference. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. Liu Bei was not on the battlefield, and Zhao Yun did not have the ability to save his master. It was impossible for him to take down Sun Tzu in a short time. However, there was nothing to be regretful about. As long as Zhao Yun can delay Sun Tzu and play the role of the exchange, it is enough. Taisher Si was injured and was entangled by Li Shui. Having lost his warhorse, Taisher Si was no match for Li Shui in terms of swordsmanship. Even though he had the advantage in strength, he was still hit repeatedly. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Bai Xiaowen transmitted his voice to Zhang Liao, telling him to stop Gan Ning. The two generals were evenly matched, a general meeting a talented general. Their martial arts skills were almost on par with each other, so it was difficult to tell who would come out on top. Su Huang against Zhou Yu, it was another battle between two lords. In terms of martial arts and direct confrontation, Su Huang completely defeated Zhou Yu. However, Zhou Yu, as a lord-ranked commander, was strong in his commanding ability. His lord-ranked skills could greatly increase the combat power of his soldiers, almost raising them to a whole new level. In addition, Zhou Yu's swordsmanship was not weak either. If one didn't consider the surrounding battlefield, with both sides bringing their own personal troops to fight, Zhou Yu might even be able to suppress Su Huang. However, in this battlefield, the Yuan army had the advantage. Not only was Zhou Yu's lord-ranked skills counteracted, but they were also suppressed. The Yuan army still had Huang Zhong, Pound, Wei Yin, Zhang Xiu, the other four lords. They also had Han Meng, Han Qiong, Murong Ping, Chao Hong, a series of rare lord-ranked generals. In the Jiangdong army, only Jiang Qin, Huang Gai, Ding Feng and a few others were left. Although they were also rare lords, their combat power was severely lacking. This time, Bai Xiaowen had spent a lot of effort to recruit generals and finally saw results. Sun Tzu's army was defeated. Taisher Si was alone and helpless. He was killed by Li Shui and Cecilia, and a dark gold treasure chest appeared. Under Su Huang's unbearable axe attacks, Zhou Yu was also in dire straits. As time passed, Zhou Yu's personal troops were reduced to 100 or so people. Every second, they were decreasing. On the other hand, Su Huang's strength did not weaken with time. "Bofu, quickly retreat." Zhou Yu took a fierce blow and turned his horse around to escape. The price he paid was his shoulder being chopped by Su Huang's axe. Although he was protected by armor, blood still flowed out and he was temporarily crippled. The 100 or so personal troops around him shouted at the same time and desperately surrounded Su Huang. Zhou Yu held his sword with one hand and stabbed several of Su Huang's personal troops. Then, he urged his horse to gallop to the east where Sun Tzu was. Sun Tzu raised his spear to block Zhao Yun and shouted, "Gong! Look at my banner and retreat!" Zhao Yun frowned. He feinted and stabbed the banner bearer beside Sun Tzu, killing him. Then, he pulled his spear horizontally. The flagpole of Sun Tzu's banner was broken. The gong sounded. Jiangdong's soldiers wanted to retreat but they could not find their lord's banner. It was more or less chaotic. Fortunately, Zhou Yu was there. As he rushed towards Sun Tzu, he was also gathering the Jiangdong soldiers. Soon, he had gathered more than 1,000 soldiers on the chaotic battlefield. More and more Jiangdong unaffiliated soldiers followed suit. Bai Xiaowen said in the team channel, "Sun Tzu can run, but Zhou Yu must die." Sun Tzu's strategy was average. There was no harm in running. On the other hand, Zhou Yu's intelligence and ability to command made Bai Xiaowen rather wary. Cecilia complied and the winged cavalry formed an arrow formation. Bai Xiaowen raised his hand and the Death Knights appeared at the front of the winged cavalry formation. Legion charge! A blood-red stream of iron scattered the soldiers that Zhou Yu had just gathered. Li Shi used invincible slash and directly cut in front of Zhou Yu. His two swords flashed with cold light. Zhou Yu could only use one hand to block with his sword. His swordsmanship was indeed very strong. Ding ding dang 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 sounds could be heard. Except for the invincible slash, Li Shi's frontal attacks were all blocked. However, Li Shi's Tiansong sword art was even more mysterious. After a few moves, Zhou Yu's sword was knocked away and disarmed. Li Shi's two swords were like mist and rain, enveloping Zhou Yu's body. Gong Jin! Sun Tzu shouted angrily. He mustered up his courage and forced Zhao Yun to retreat. Spiritual Realms Rule Message: Sun Tzu entered a berserk state because of Zhou Yu's danger. Attack power increased by 20%, movement speed increased by 20%, toughness increased by 20%, and hit stiffness greatly reduced. Lasts for 60 minutes. After the berserk state ends, all of Sun Tzu's attributes will be reduced by 20% for 3 days. No wonder Sun Tzu's sudden burst of power could force Zhao Yun to retreat. If it was a weaker lord, they would have been seriously injured by Sun Tzu's sudden burst of power. However, Zhao Yun was only careless and was not injured. Seeing Sun Tzu escape, he immediately urged his warhorse to give chase. At this time, Sun Tzu has additional speed bonus, and he is also riding a famous horse. Zhao Yun can't catch up without riding a flying horse to save his master. However, under the command of Bai Xiaowen, Pound and Zhang Xiu blocked in front of Sun Tzu with their sword and spear. Sun Tzu angrily fought, but Pound and Zhang Xiu complemented each other and blocked him without hesitation. Zhou Yu said sternly, "Bofu, go! Avenge me!" His warhorse had been killed by Li Shi. He could only use his helmet to block Li Shi's fierce attacks. He was in imminent danger. Chapter 1379. Generally speaking, in Chinese dramas, the plot would develop like this: "Let's go. I'm not leaving. Let's go. No. If we die, let's die together." Then, the enemy would tacitly give this pair of lovebirds, brothers, a long conversation. The conversation was long enough to exaggerate the tragic sacrifice of one of them. In the end, the other had no choice but to escape. Luckily, Sun Tzu was a decisive person. He did not act out a scene of "I'm not leaving." Instead, he looked around the battlefield and shouted, "If you can't escape, you can surrender." After saying this, Sun Tzu took a spear strike from Zhang Xiu and forced Pound to retreat. He then turned around and left without any hesitation. In the berserk state, Sun Tzu ran very quickly. Zhao Yun chased after him. Pound and Zhang Xiu also wanted to chase after him. Bai Xiaowen shouted, "No need to chase." The biggest taboo in a team battle was to desperately chase after a fleeing enemy with low HP. In the end, the team battle would end in a loss. This was because the remaining HP of the fleeing players and the superior forces of the pursuing players had, in a sense, formed an exchange. Bai Xiaowen did not want Sun Tzu to exchange for Zhao Yun, Pound, and Zhang Xiu. Although the Yuan army's remaining forces were enough to defeat the Jiandong army, it was inevitable that many of them would escape. Furthermore, Sun Tzu was in a berserk state. His damage was greatly reduced and his movement speed was increased by 20%. It was very difficult to catch up. With Zhao Yun and the other two remaining, the scattered Jiandong army would have no chance. Li Shi had already heavily injured Zhou Yu. A few more strikes and he would be able to kill him. However, Li Shi still asked in the group channel, "Will killing Zhou Yu be worth it?" Bai Xiaowen, group channel from the Grand Unification contribution points, summoning an enemy general to surrender will give you the highest contribution points. Capturing alive will give you the second highest contribution points. Killing the enemy will give you the lowest contribution points. This is determined by the difficulty of the mission. However, if you kill Zhou Yu, you might be able to obtain a shrunken dark gold treasure chest. This was the answer that Bai Xiaowen came up with after consulting the spirit world. This was because capturing an enemy general alive was more difficult than killing him. Persuading him to surrender was more difficult on the basis of capturing him alive. The rule of the spirit realm was that the higher the difficulty, the greater the contribution. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen continued. "I suggest we capture Zhou Yu alive. Taisher Ci was killed because the outcome of the war was still unknown. Now that Sun Tzu had escaped, Jiandong's army was completely routed. Zhou Yu was injured by Su Huang. Let's not talk about whether or not he would drop a treasure chest. Even if he did, he would just shrink into a water tank. Why don't I give you some contribution points for the unification of the world?" Li Shi would be the one to receive the Grand Unification contribution if he was captured alive. If they could be persuaded to surrender, then part of the contribution to the unification would fall on Bai Xiaowen's head. Of course, it was unlikely that Zhou Yu would surrender. Li Shi came to his senses and ordered his soldiers to capture the heavily injured Zhou Yu alive. The other generals of Jiandong, such as Gan Ning, Jiang Qin, and Ding Feng, fought against Bai Xiaowen's subordinates and were captured after exhausting their strength. Only Huang Gai and his soldiers managed to break through the encirclement and escape. Bai Xiaowen led his troops to clean up the battlefield and rewarded the soldiers. The soldiers sang a song of victory and rushed to Chaisang under Bai Xiaowen's command. Bai Xiaowen also sent people to drive the ships to Jiangbei to pick up the rest of the Yuan army. He left Zhang Liao's troops at Sanjiankou to receive the reinforcements. This was only Bai Xiaowen's 30,000 vanguard troops. Once the 60 to 70,000 troops arrived, the 100,000 troops would be able to sweep through Jiangnan. It was worth mentioning that the Changjiang River flowed north in Jiangxia Prefecture. It only flowed east after reaching Poyang Prefecture. Hence, Sun Tzu's territory could be called Jiangdong, which corresponded to the west and east of Jingzhou. It could also be called Jiangnan, which corresponded to Huainan, north of Yangzhou, and Xuzhou. Zhao Yun rejected the reward and said to Bai Xiaowen, "I don't want the reward. I hope that Prince Yan will not disappoint us." Bai Xiaowen sighed in his heart, unwilling to part with Zhao Yun. His agreement with Zhao Yun was to exchange the lives of Lu, Guan, and Zhang for Zhao Yun to attack. Originally, Bai Xiaowen wanted to use this to make Zhao Yun submit to him. However, Zhao Yun rejected him, so he could only settle for the next best thing. It seemed like this deal was unfair. However, Bai Xiaowen did not want to kill Guan Yu. Hence, there was no such thing as a loss. Bai Xiaowen's plan was to use Zhao Yun's attack to pacify Jiangnan. After that, whether or not he recruited Zhao Yun would not make much of a difference. The world was about to be unified. The importance of fierce generals would be greatly reduced. Especially for Bai Xiaowen, who was an awakened one. Recruiting Zhao Yun could only satisfy his hobby of collecting famous generals. However, Bai Xiaowen did not have this hobby. Bai Xiaowen said, "A gentleman's word is more important than 9 cauldrons. Zilong, don't worry. After Jiangnan is pacified, I will fulfill my promise. Sun Tzu took the remaining dozens of people and fled to the east. That was the direction of Wu County. Wu County was Sun Tzu's capital. It had accumulated a lot of money and food. Wu County was also a large county. It had a flourishing population. Thus, he could recruit a lot of soldiers and horses. Although he was defeated, Sun Tzu's ambition was not extinguished. When they arrived at the foot of a mountain, Sun Tzu's warhorse suddenly snorted. Sun Tzu reined in his horse and looked at the undulating terrain in front of him. The mountains were covered by clouds and fog. He was puzzled. Where is this place? A defeated soldier said, "This is Mount Quang of Poyang County, also known as Mount Quang. If we go forward and cross Lake Poyang, we will arrive at Poyang County." Sun Tzu comforted his warhorse and said, "I feel something is wrong. Be alert while we are marching." When they entered the mountain, suddenly a group of masked men in black came out from the ridge. They were all holding small crossbows and shot at Sun Tzu's soldiers. This group of masked men in black had extremely high accuracy. Sun Tzu's remaining soldiers were all shot down by the sound of gunfire. Sun Tzu shouted and jumped off his horse. He took out his bow and shot arrows at the enemy. Sun Tzu's berserk state had disappeared. He entered a weakened state for 3 days. All his attributes dropped by 20%. Sun Tzu could only dodge some of the crossbow bolts shot by the black-clothed masked man, and the rest he could only block. Although Sun Tzu shot down a few enemies, the masked men in black outnumbered him. He had to give up his bow and arrows and walk up the mountain. Along the way, Sun Tzu pulled out his sword to block the arrows. His body was hit by 7 or 8 arrows. Blood flowed out. Sun Tzu felt his wounds were itchy. The pain was weak. He was not happy. This meant that the arrows were poisonous. "You are not Yuanshi's soldiers. Who are you subordinates of?" Sun Tzu finally got close to the masked men and cut them down with his sword. But the masked men in black were not afraid of death. If one of them died, 2 more would take his place. The others were like emotionless machines. They only shot arrows with poisonous arrows. Chapter 1380. Sun Tzu fought with the assassin and gradually felt his body become heavy and dizzy. He knew that the poison from the crossbow arrow had begun to take effect, so he gritted his teeth and endured. Sun Tzu's vision gradually overlapped with his enemies. Originally, each strike of his sword would kill an enemy, but now, several strikes missed. The close combat masked men in black used a curved weapon that looked like a sword. It was called the Wu Go. When Sun Tzu's poison flared up, their close combat attacks would hit Sun Tzu's body and cause more serious injuries. Sun Tzu leaned against a pine tree and laughed. "If I knew this would happen, I would not have run away. I only hate that I died in the hands of these rats." The masked men did not show any emotion. They quietly approached in 2s and 3s. "Don't hurt my lord." Suddenly, a shout came from the mouth of the valley. A group of soldiers rushed in. The leader was a general with white hair and a robust body. He wielded a long saber with one hand and was vigorous as a tiger. He continuously killed the masked assassins in black. This general was Huang Gai. There was a broken arrow shaft on his shoulder, but he turned a blind eye to it as he continued to fight. The remaining soldiers around Huang Gai also summoned their courage and rushed to the ridge to fight with the masked men. Sun Tzu suddenly became spirited and shouted, "The heavens have not forsaken me." He pulled out 2 crossbow arrows from his chest and single-handedly grabbed a masked man in black. With a snap sound, he broke the neck of the masked man and used it as a long weapon. Although his body was heavy and his line of sight was blocked, Sun Tzu used his divine power to swing the corpse and made it difficult for the masked men to approach him. When Huang Gai and Sun Tzu were about to meet, a young man dressed like a Confucian scholar, about 17 or 18 years old, jumped down from a big tree. His long sword flashed with cold light and blocked Huang Gai and Sun Tzu. Huang Gai was shocked and angry. "You are Lu Sun." Previously, Lu Sun accompanied Lu Ji to Sun Tzu's barracks, so Huang Gai recognized him. Lu Sun stabbed Huang Gai's bodyguard with his sword. His face was expressionless as he said, "It's me. You betrayed your lord and defected to the enemy." Huang Gai pointed at Lu Sun's nose and scolded. Lu Sun shook his head and said, "You are wrong. Sun Tzu borrowed the traitor Yuan Shu's army to annex Jiangdong and expel Han official Lu Yao. He is a traitor to the imperial court. He is only your lord. Who in Jiangdong would recognize him as their master? Not to mention that Sun Tzu used force to kill dissidents and forced Lu clan to be his spy and betray the imperial court. I am going to borrow Sun Tzu's head to present to King Yan to restore Lu family's reputation." These words left Huang Gai speechless. Sun Tzu shouted, "The winner is the king while the loser is the bandit. Today, only by fighting to the death would they have a chance at survival. If I can escape and make a comeback, I will definitely raise the Lu family to the ground." While speaking, Sun Tzu threw away the corpse in his hand, picked up a wuhook sword in each hand and rushed towards Lu Sun. Lu Sun raised his sword to meet Sun Tzu's attack. Chi! Chi! His sword left 2 bloody marks on Sun Tzu's body. But Sun Tzu's attacks all fell on empty air. Sun Tzu was already exhausted. In addition to the Berserk debuff, which reduced all his attributes by 20%, he was also hit with 10 layers of poison. His movement was slowed by 30%, and his vision was blurred. Fortunately, he was still a lord. Otherwise, the negative effects of the poison would be even worse. Lu Sun was not good at riding a horse, but his swordsmanship was really good. He was originally the 4th governor of Eastern Wu. He was good at commanding troops in battle. He was not just a scholar. Bullying the half-crippled Sun Tzu was not a problem. Huang Gai saw that the situation was not good. He bravely stepped forward and shouted, "Lord, get on the horse and run. I will cover you." Ignoring the black-clothed masked men's obstruction, Huang Gai's long sword slashed towards Lu Sun. Huang Gai's bodyguards protected Sun Tzu and escaped. The black-clothed masked men wanted to chase, but Lu Sun stopped them. He said, "We can't catch up. But if we can get Huang Gai's head, it will be enough to prove the innocence of Jiangdong's nobles." He immediately ordered the black-clothed masked men to surround and kill Huang Gai. Huang Gai fought to the death. Blood flowed everywhere. When he died, his body was still standing upright. Seeing that there were only 20 black-clothed masked men left, Lu Sun shook his head and muttered to himself, "If there were 100 or 200 more men of sacrifice waiting at the mouth of the valley, Sun Tzu would not be able to escape." A masked man in black took off his veil, revealing a slightly aged face. He said, "Young master, you've already brought out all the men of sacrifice from the Lu clan and borrowed a group of people from the Gu clan. You really don't have any extra forces." Lu Sun nodded and said, "Sun Tzu's suppression of Jiangdong's nobles is very effective. If we give him a few more years, Jiangdong's nobles will have no power to resist and will become his dogs." Sun Tzu escaped from Kuang Mountain under the protection of dozens of soldiers. Considering that Wu County was the foundation of Jiangdong's Lu family, Sun Tzu did not dare to go there. He turned south and went to Luling. In Luling, there were still 3,000 elite soldiers led by Han Dang and Zhou Tai. They were originally there to defend against Zhang He and Jia Su. Now, they became Sun Tzu's last hope. At this time, Bai Xiaowen was commanding the army to attack the 6 counties of Jiangnan. As for Sun Tzu, Bai Xiaowen used the geographical map to find out his position and movements. Then, he ordered Cecilia, Li Shi, and Han Su to lead the winged cavalry to chase after him. Sun Tzu also knew the danger and did not let down his guard. After enduring the residual effect of the crossbow poison, he traveled day and night and finally arrived at Luling. In Luling, Sun Tzu saw Han Dang and Zhou Tai. When the two heard the news of the defeat at Sanjiankou, they were shocked. After asking about Sun Tzu's physical condition, Han Dang and Zhou Tai asked Sun Tzu about the next step of the plan. Sun Tzu missed Zhou Yu very much, but now he had to make the decision himself. Now Luling cannot be defended. Yuan Shi's army has swept through Jiangnan and will soon arrive at Luling County. When the time comes, Luling will be attacked from both front and rear. Sooner or later, it will be a dead end. Sun Tzu's thoughts were still quite clear. He looked at the map and said, "Now all the feudal lords have been swept away by Yuan Shi. Only Shirxia of Jiao province is left. We can only take 3,000 soldiers and rush to Jiao province to seek refuge with Shirxia. We can borrow soldiers and horses and try to counterattack." Zhou Tai said, "If Shirxia does not lend soldiers, what should we do?" Sun Tzu snorted, "I see mediocre people like Shirxia as clay chickens and pottery dogs. If he does not lend me soldiers, I will kill him during the banquet and take his Jiao province as our foundation." When Sun Tzu mentioned the banquet, he was not speaking without thinking. During the chaos of the three kingdoms, each feudal lord would at least hold a banquet to welcome the fallen feudal lords who sought refuge in their territory. This was the basic etiquette. The idea was beautiful, but the reality was bleak. When Sun Tzu and his army arrived at Jiao province, there was no banquet as expected. Shirxia did not even let him enter the gate. Sun Tzu shouted at the gate. Shirxia ordered someone to answer him from the top of the city wall, "The situation of the world is clear. My lord has sent an envoy to visit Yan Wang to discuss the matter of surrendering. General is a wanted criminal of the imperial court. Please forgive us for not being able to receive you." Chapter 1381. Sun Tzu was helpless. He wanted to attack the city, but first of all, he didn't have enough troops. Secondly, he was afraid of Yuan Shi's pursuers. Zhou Tai said, "To the south, there is a large island called Jia State with several counties. My lord, why don't you ask for a large ship to go to Jia State? Shirxia is a coward and is afraid that our army will attack the city. He will definitely agree." Sun Tzu frowned. "My son family has been living in Huaxia. How can we escape to a barbarian land?" Zhou Tai said, "My lord is only temporarily staying in Jia State as a stopgap measure." Sun Tzu could only agree. Sure enough, as Zhou Tai expected, Shirxia didn't want to provoke Sun Tzu, so he agreed to send a ship and provisions. Sun Tzu was sent out of the country like a plague. When Sun Tzu went to Shuling, Jiaozhou, and sailed out to sea, Bai Xiaowen was also leading the army and divided into 3 groups to sweep Jiannan. Now that the unification was set in stone, Bai Xiaowen continued to create opportunities for his teammates to lead the army to attack the city and gain the unification contribution. This was the advantage of being the lord of a force. With Bai Xiaowen's current prestige, if he slightly favored some of his teammates and gave them the opportunity to gain merits, no native generals would object. Even if they had objections, they would keep it in their hearts. If he wasn't the lord of a force, he would have to rely on the hunters to find a way to gain the authority to lead the army to attack the city. It was certainly not as convenient as giving an order now. In fact, several of his teammates had a good performance in the unification process. According to Bai Xiaowen's estimate, even Han Su could get a hero-class evolver book. This was the advantage of having a small number of people. The White Phoenix team only had 5 people, but they dominated the unification of the 3 countries. Even if a small part of the contribution was shared with Camille's team, the cake was too big and the number of people sharing it was too small. So, the amount of contribution each person received was amazing. This was different from the Divine Court. There were easily 30 to 40 people in a class in the Divine Court, and the main contribution had to be distributed to the class monitor, vice class monitor, and several team leaders. Naturally, the contribution distributed to each awakened in the Divine Court was very small. According to Camille's description, the God's Court could only produce 2 or 3 evolvers with hero template and about 10 elite evolvers. The rest were all evolvers with normal templates. Of course, if the Divine Court unified the 3 countries, the situation would be much better. The number of hero and elite evolvers would at least double, and there would be a great chance for a Lord Evolver to appear. This was also the reason why Richard was able to secure his position as the monitor of the Divine Court training camp so quickly. He just didn't know what kind of reproach Richard would face when he returned in defeat. Moreover, Li Shi and the others' attack on Jiangnan went smoothly. Many of the guardians of the various counties were from Jiangdong's aristocratic families. They scrambled to join Bai Xiaowen's side without shedding a drop of blood. especially after Lu Xun paid a personal visit and delivered Huang Gai's severed head. Wu County, Danyang County, and the other counties in the east automatically submitted to Lu Xun without fighting. As for Luling, it was also conquered by Zhang He and Jia Su. The reason was very simple. Han Dang and Zhou Tai abandoned the city, and Zhang He and Jia Su picked up a city for free. Bai Xiaowen then met the envoy of Jiao Province's Shi Xie. This envoy was none other than Shi Xie's son, Shi Hui. Sending his son on a diplomatic mission was enough to show Shi Xie's sincerity. Bai Xiaowen comforted Shi Hui and promised, "If your father surrenders, I will recommend him to be the king of Nanyue and serve the country for generations to come." Shi Hui was overjoyed and knelt down to thank him. "My family will be loyal to the king of Yan and the imperial court for generations. This subject is willing to be a hostage to prove my loyalty." Shi Hui was also very transparent. He first said that he was loyal to the king of Yan and then the imperial court. The purpose of this was self-evident. Bai Xiaowen originally thought that he would need to change the local officials of Jiao Province. However, he quickly received a notification from the spiritual world that he had obtained the ruling rights of Jingzhou, Yangzhou, and Jiao Province. The Grand Unification main storyline Quest 4 had been announced as completed, and he could submit the quest at any time. Bai Xiaowen also learned that Sun Tzu had brought Han Dang and Zhou Tai out to sea toward Jia Province, which would be Hainan Island in the future. Hainan Island is not part of the Grand Unification main storyline. This is not bad. Liu Bei went to Dongying, and Sun Tzu went to Hainan. Bai Xiaowen smiled and ordered people to bring Sun Tzu's family and Zhou Yu to Yedu. This is not to say that Bai Xiaowen covets the Xiao Qiao. If possible, he does not mind sending Sun Tzu's family back to Jia Prefecture and return them to Sun Tzu. However, doing so would only make the generals and generals feel weird. This was because normally speaking, Sun Tzu's family had value. As a ruler, he would have to be crazy to do so. Bai Xiaowen was not worried about Sun Tzu's revenge. Anyway, the Grand Unification main storyline Quest 4 had been completed. Even if Sun Tzu and Liu Bei returned to the Central Plains, it would not affect Bai Xiaowen from submitting the quest. Missions that had been completed would not return to their incomplete state. This was also the operation of the spiritual realm's rules to prevent some awakened from repeatedly jumping around opportunistically. As for Zhao Yun, Bai Xiaowen also fulfilled the agreement. He used a fast boat to send him and Liu Bei's family to Dongying. Bai Xiaowen did not choose to submit the Grand Unification main storyline Quest 4 for the time being. He planned to return to Yedu, ascend the throne, and get the last contribution before submitting it. After occupying Jiangnan, Bai Xiaowen appointed Sun Yu as the governor of Yangzhou, promoted Lu Xun as the governor of Yangzhou, and promoted Zhang He as the governor of Yangzhou. He was in charge of Yangzhou's military affairs. The military and government were separated. The subordinate officials of various counties were appointed to their original positions. After consolidating Jiangnan, Bai Xiaowen returned to the imperial court. However, before returning to the imperial court, Bai Xiaowen received an unexpected but reasonable piece of news. There was a fire in Yedu. This fire was not a natural disaster. It was a man-made disaster. After Bai Xiaowen went to Jiangnan, Emperor Lu Xia, who lived in seclusion in the palace, sent out a secret edict. He gathered the officials who were still loyal to the Han dynasty and set fire to Yedu in an attempt to make a final struggle. However, before Bai Xiaowen set out, he had made two preparations. First, the father and son, Zhu Shou and Zhu Hu, one civil and one military, cooperated with Tianfeng to seal the city gate of Yedu. They patrolled the city to put out the fire and pacified the people. Then, the daughter of the Marquis of Shiliang, Han Qi, or Camille, who was the concubine, brought her trusted subordinates, Monica, Luke, and intercepted the secret edict. Actually, this was also Bai Xiaowen's arrangement. He told Camille to pay close attention to a few Han officials who were famous in the romance of the Three Kingdoms. There was a high chance that she could get a decent contribution for the unification of China. Camille's small group brought 100 Shiliang guards to capture Geng Ji and Wei Huang. They also killed Jin Yi, who started the fire, and calmed the chaos. Then, Zhu Shou and Zhu Hu brought the Edu troops to lock up the families of the Han officials who started the rebellion. When Bai Xiaowen received this news, the chaos in Yedu had already calmed down. Chapter 1382. This time, Bai Xiaowen did not show any mercy. In the 4th month of the 2nd year of Taisher, King Yan returned to Yedu with a great victory. This very day, he issued an imperial edict to exterminate Geng Ji, Wei Huang, Jin Yi, and the others 3 clans, and behead them all at Kaishiku. This was to establish his authority and pave the way for him to become an emperor. As expected, the officials were fearful and no one dared to say a word. Dong Zhao and Hua Xian jointly submitted a petition, saying that Yan Wang was virtuous in all directions, benevolent in all things. Even Tang Yao and Yu Shun were not as good as him. After discussion among the officials, they hoped that the Han Emperor would follow Yao and Shun's example and hand over the rivers and mountains to Yan Wang. The emperor was shocked and cried. He said that he did not do anything wrong and could not bear to give up the country of his ancestors. Hua Xian led 2 people, Li Fu and Su Ji, forward. "Your Majesty, you can ask these 2 people and know the fate." Li Fu said, "Since King Yan ascended the throne, the Qilin was born, the phoenix came, the yellow dragon appeared, the golden crane was born, and the sweet dew fell. Your Majesty, this is an auspicious sign from the heavens, proving that King Yan should replace Yan Han." Su Ji also said that he was in charge of the imperial astronomer and observed the sky at night. Yan Han's fate was over and Yan's fate was at the end. Then, Hua Xian concluded, "I heard that during the expedition to Jiangnan, the king of Yan's army encountered a fire attack by the thieves. Suddenly, the wind changed direction and turned to the northwest wind. The thieves set fire to themselves. That was why the king of Yan could conquer Jiangnan so quickly. It can be seen that Yan's fate is in the hands of heaven. This is the consensus after discussion. Your Majesty, please do not disappoint the officials." In the romance of the 3 kingdoms, Lu Xia still tried his best to resist. However, it was different from the romance of the 3 kingdoms. The world was settled and Bai Xiaowen had completed the unification. Lu Xia had no hope. There was also the case of Geng Ji, Wei Huang, and the rest being exterminated. Lu Xia was fearful. It was not that he did not understand the big picture. Now that Sichuan, Jingzhou, and Jiangnan were all at peace, the world belonged to Yan. As the emperor in name, he was useless. To put it cruelly, even if Prince Yan Yuanshi killed him and stepped on his corpse to ascend to the throne, no one would dare to oppose him. After a symbolic resistance, the emperor accepted his fate. He ordered Chen Kunkeo to carry the imperial edict, Hua Xian to carry the imperial jade seal, and Dong Zhao to carry the imperial edict. What followed was another round of excuses. Then, under Jiasu's persuasion, the emperor ordered people to build a Zen platform and read the Zen kingdom's edict on it. Bai Xiaowen stood on the Zen receiving platform, receiving the grand ceremony and ascending to the throne. Immediately, he changed the 2nd year of Taisher to the 1st year of Taichu, and the country's name was Great Yan. He issued a decree to pardon the world, and conferred the title of Great Ancestor to his deceased father, Yuan Shao, as Emperor Taizu. More than 400 bureaucrats, big and small, were kneeling below the Zen receiving platform. Hua Xian asked how to settle Mrs. Liu. Bai Xiaowen used the romance of the 3 kingdoms to confer the title of Duke of Shanyang to the deposed emperor. After Bai Xiaowen's Zen receiving platform ended, he returned to the Yedu imperial court to receive the congratulations of the officials. Then, he conferred many official positions. The officials of the old Sima Manor all became court officials, and the old officials in the imperial court underwent a huge change. Jinmi was given the title of empress, and the 15 concubines were all brought into the imperial court to fill up the harem. The first time Bai Xiaowen went to the imperial court, he announced to the world that Huaxia had been through war for a long time, and the people were suffering. Now that the great Yan emperor had ascended to the throne, he encouraged the people to open up wastelands, encourage agriculture, build irrigation, reduce taxes, etc. After the imperial court ended, Just as Bai Xiaowen was considering whether or not to submit the mission to unify the country, he welcomed a guest. Gu Xian. Bai Xiaowen was delighted, and he ordered the officials to set up a banquet for him to sit opposite Gu Xian. When Gu Xian saw Bai Xiaowen's dragon robe and jade belt, he smiled and said, "Your Majesty has ascended to the throne and is already the most powerful person in the world. How would I dare to drink with your Majesty?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Taoist priest is an old friend of mine, and also my fellow Taoist. In front of others, I am the emperor, but in front of Taoist priest, I am still a Taoist." Gu Xian chuckled, but changed the way he addressed him. "Young master, now that the world is at peace, your ambition has been achieved. Do you want to be the emperor of the world, or continue to seek the Tao?" Bai Xiaowen said seriously, "Cultivating the Tao is my original wish. How would it change because of fame and fortune?" Gu Xian nodded. "Young master, you have not forgotten your original intention, and you regard the world's position as nothing but grass. However, the world cannot be without you now. Otherwise, all the blame will be on me, and I can't bear it." Bai Xiaowen pretended to be puzzled and said, "Why do you say that, Taoist priest? When I become the emperor, I only need to carry out good governance and let the officials and subordinates carry it out. It won't delay my cultivation." Gu Xian smiled and shook his head, then took out a jade scroll from his sleeve. "Do you still remember this?" Bai Xiaowen thought to himself, "You finally took it out. Why don't I remember what's mine?" Gu Xian smiled and said, "In Sichuan's Jinping Mountain, I parted ways with you because there was an eminent Taoist on Jinping Mountain, whose Taoist name was Zisu. I carried the jade scroll and went up Jinping Mountain to visit Venerable Zisu. I asked about the jade scroll and finally found some clues." Venerable Zisu. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes slightly. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, such a person did appear, but he only appeared once. At that time, when Liu Bei attacked Sichuan, Liu Zhang sent 4 generals, Liu Gu, Deng Xian, Ling Bao, and Zhang Ren to guard Luochang. When these 4 generals passed by Jinping Mountain, they had visited Venerable Zisu. The reply they received was, "The left dragon and the right phoenix flew into Sichuan. The young phoenix fell to the ground, and the crouching dragon rose to the sky. One gain and one loss, fate is inevitable. Act according to the circumstances, and don't be lost in the underworld." As for Liu Gu and the other 3, the reply was, "Fate is inevitable, why ask again?" Later, the young phoenix, Pang Tong, was shot to death, and the crouching dragon, Zhuge Liang, entered Sichuan to assist Liu Bei. Liu Gu and the other 3 did not escape death, and were all killed. From this, it could be seen that Venerable Zisu should be a Taoist expert who was good at divination. Bai Xiaowen was excited when he thought of this, and asked, "What did that expert say?" Gu Xian said, "Venerable Zisu refused to say at first, but after I mentioned my sect, he said 12 words. Gu Xian was really an excellent storyteller. Bai Xiaowen could only ask, "What 12 words?" Gu Xian took out a piece of silk from his sleeve and unfolded it. "If you want to solve the jade slip, you have to go to the Taoist ancestral court." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. "Where's the Taoist ancestral court?" Gu Xian smiled and said, "Young master, you are a Taoist, how can you not know about the Taoist ancestral court? In the east of the Sichuan Sword Pavilion, there is a strange mountain called Crane Mountain. It is said that the Qi refinement cultivators of the Pre-Qin dynasty, Guangqingzi, and Zhou Yishan of the Western Han dynasty had once comprehended the Tao here and ascended on cranes. 60 years ago, Zhang Daoling came to the Taoist sect here and worshipped me as the sect master. Only then did the world know the name of Taoism." Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "The Taoist ancestral court is Crane Mountain." Gu Xian said, "Young master, do you understand now? There is an immortal fate hidden in this jade slip. Since you are the beginning of karma, you have to go there personally to solve the mystery of the jade slip." Chapter 1383. Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat as he asked, "We're not the only ones solving the mystery of the jade scroll, right? Who else is going with us?" Gu Xian said in surprise, "It's still my master, Mr. Wu Jiao." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and said, I have many fierce generals under my command and millions of armor. Will they be of any use? Gu Xian shook his head and said, no matter how many secular armies there are, they are useless in the ancestral court of Taoism. Instead, they will spoil the opportunity. After a pause, Gu Xian said, according to my master, Mr. Wu Jiao, you are the most important person on this trip. Besides you, the more outsiders there are, the easier it is to spoil the opportunity. Therefore, it's best if you don't bring anyone else. Just the three of us? That's right. Gu Xian gave an affirmative answer. But as you said, I have just ascended the throne and there are many things waiting to be done. If I disappear, there will be chaos in the court and the feudal lords who have just been suppressed will cause trouble again. Bai Xiaowen said. Gu Xian said, there is a way. Bai Xiaowen revealed an inquisitive look. Gu Xian said, you should have read the first volume of the Heavenly Tomes. Then you should have read the Art of Peace recorded in the second volume of the Heavenly Tomes, right? Bai Xiaowen nodded. Gu Xian continued, there is a puppet control technique and an illusion technique. Do you have any impression of them? Bai Xiaowen nodded again. He had a good memory. The puppet control technique and the illusion technique were both level 1 Dao techniques recorded in the second volume of the Heavenly Tomes. He could learn them with his current elemental energy of 63 points. However, Bai Xiaowen roughly looked at their effects and felt that they were not very useful, so he did not learn them. Gu Xian said, if you learn these two basic Dao techniques, I can teach you a method to combine them and evolve a new incarnation Dao technique. Incarnation? Gu Xian nodded and said, the Taoist art of illusion can use your appearance as a blueprint to create a realistic illusion, but it cannot move. Puppet controlling technique, on the other hand, was to split a strand of thought onto the puppet, allowing it to move freely. The incarnation Dao technique is the product of the combination of the two. Bai Xiaowen finally understood. So, the incarnation Dao technique can create an illusion that can move freely? Then, I'll leave my incarnation in Yedu while my real body can accompany you and your master to Crane Mountain. Gu Xian nodded. Young master, you're extremely intelligent. Bai Xiaowen had a rough understanding. There were 729 Tier 1 Dao techniques, and Tier 2 Dao techniques were probably derived from the foundation of Tier 1 Dao techniques. Perhaps this Avatar Dao technique was at the second tier. It didn't seem to have much of an effect, but there were many times when it had miraculous effects, especially during the exploration of the spirit realm. An avatar that could move freely was much stronger than a pure avatar that couldn't move. Bai Xiaowen immediately agreed and began to read the Taiping art, starting to learn the Tier 1 Dao techniques, illusion and puppet controlling technique. Bai Xiaowen also understood from Gu Xian's conversation that Gu Xian's strength wasn't as simple as it seemed. This was because Gu Xian had many Dao techniques that were independent of the skill list and couldn't be seen by insight at all. This was an ability brought about by Gu Xian's knowledge. Moreover, after reading the 3 heavenly tomes, Gu Xian's strength should be even stronger. Bai Xiaowen practiced for 2 days and 1 night in a row and finally learned the 2 Tier 1 Dao techniques. Then, he began to practice the incarnation Dao technique that Gu Xian taught him. This time, it was much faster. It only took him a few hours to master this high-end Tier 2 Dao technique. In the courtyard, the two Bai Xiaowen sat facing each other. One patted the other's shoulder, and the other stroked the other's hair. Bai Xiaowen's real body felt very novel. It was a very strange feeling to have an external incarnation. This was because the illusion sitting opposite him was rooted in a wisp of Bai Xiaowen's own thoughts. It was like another him. Young master's talent in Taoist magic truly amazes me. Gu Xian stroked his beard and said, with this incarnation, you should be able to pass off as the real one. However, this incarnation can't be attacked with great force, or else it will directly dissipate. For safety's sake, young master should try to attend court as little as possible during this period, lest you give yourself away. Bai Xiaowen said, with Tianfeng, Zhu Shou, and the others handling the government affairs, I'm quite relieved. These days, I'll tell the outside world that I'm in seclusion and cultivating. Unless there's an urgent matter, don't disturb me. Gu Xian nodded and said, young master, please make the arrangements. Master and I will wait at the pavilion 10 miles southwest of Yadu. The two agreed on a date and temporarily parted ways. Bai Xiaowen called the other members of the White Phoenix squad and told them his next step. You're going alone? Can you really do it? Li Shi asked with concern. Qiao Rui said, Crane Mountain, ancestral court of Taoism. It sounds like an extraordinary instance. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, it's okay. My Black Soul Stone has accumulated enough growth points and can be upgraded to the 8th level. When the time comes, my combat strength will soar further. Besides, Gu Xian's Wasi will accompany me. Can these two be trusted? Han Su asked. Bai Xiaowen said, although I've never met Wasi, Gu Xian and I have a good personal relationship. Moreover, as a cultivator, it's taboo to cause chaos in the world. That will deplete merit and lead to sin. Therefore, I can basically be sure that these two won't do anything to harm me. Qiao Rui said, even if it's unfavorable, we've already unified the world. We can submit the mission at any time and leave directly. Cecilia said, what's in the 8th level of the Black Soul Stone? Why don't you upgrade it first? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said with a smile, there's no need for now. With my current strength, I can protect myself in the Three Kingdoms plane. The Black Soul Stone, let's put it aside for now. Don't ask about it anymore. Cecilia looked puzzled, but she nodded and didn't say anything. Li Shi said sourly, don't forget your 16 wives. Do you want to say goodbye to them? Bai Xiaowen coughed and said, Jinmi, I can't hide it from her. I have to make it clear. As for the other 15 concubines, they're just decorations anyway. It doesn't matter. Li Shi's expression unexpectedly turned sunny. He waved his hand and said, okay. In the bedroom. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for a while. Jinmi sat in front of the bed. When she heard Bai Xiaowen's words, she smiled faintly and said, husband, how long are you going to hide it from me? At this time, don't you have anything you want to say to me? Bai Xiaowen was not a fool. When he heard this, he said, oh, in his heart. Well, it seems that you've guessed it. Bai Xiaowen sighed and said, yes, it's just like what you think. Really? Jinmi got off the bed in a panic and hugged Bai Xiaowen. Husband, why didn't you say so earlier? No wonder you haven't slept with me. It turns out that you have. Well, husband, don't hide your illness for fear of treatment. You should ask the medical officer to treat you, lest the great Yan dynasty has no descendants. Chapter 1384. Bai Xiaowen. Jinmi's eyes were sparkling, almost dripping with tears. Bai Xiaowen finally understood. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, what are you thinking? I have no illness. Note, Jinmi said seriously, husband, I said that you can't hide your illness for fear of treatment. If you're sick, you have to treat it. There's nothing shameful about this kind of illness. I don't think those doctors dare to gossip or talk nonsense. Bai Xiaowen, as a healthy man, he was misunderstood to have an unmentionable disease, impotence. Moreover, it seemed like he couldn't get away with it. If this could be tolerated, what else could not be tolerated? Bai Xiaowen was just about to explain when he saw Jinmi's smile. She didn't seem to be nervous. He suddenly understood what Jinmi was thinking. Hero Luo, you really put a lot of thought into it. Bai Xiaowen picked up Jinmi, lifted the red gauze curtain, and threw her on the ivory bed. Jinmi blushed as if she was drunk. She whispered, husband, what are you doing? Bai Xiaowen leaned over and looked at her face. I suddenly feel that it's better to use facts to prove it. A night of love was worth 1,000 gold. Even if it was spent, it would come back. Bai Xiaowen and Jinmi were honest with each other. They understood each other deeply and didn't hide anything anymore. Bai Xiaowen's guess was right. Jinmi could really see that she was a different person. When exactly did it start? when Bai Xiaowen inherited Yuan Shao's foundation and sat firmly in the position of commander-in-chief. However, Jinmi didn't panic like ordinary women. Moreover, women in the Three Kingdoms era didn't have such a strong concept of chastity as women in the Ming and Qing dynasties. When Zhao Yun attacked Guiyang, Governor Zhao Fan betrothed his wife to Zhao Yun. However, his wife was reluctant. For example, the story of Cao Cao and Zhang Xiu's aunt, Mrs. Zhou, could prove this point. Even Jinmi herself was snatched away by Cao Pai in the romance of the Three Kingdoms. For a beautiful woman in a chaotic world, if she could find an indomitable husband who could protect her family and her own safety, it was already worth entrusting her heart to him. Moreover, Bai Xiaowen was so charming. Jinmi originally thought that Bai Xiaowen did it for power and beauty. Later, when she saw that Bai Xiaowen didn't care about her or his concubines, she gradually began to panic. She had heard that Bai Xiaowen had thrown himself into troubled times in order to pacify the world. This was his Tao as a cultivator. Jinmi believed her. She was afraid that Bai Xiaowen would leave and hide his achievements and fame, leaving her, a weak woman, behind. Therefore, she panicked. During the expedition to Jiangnan, Jinmi asked to go with the army because she wanted to deepen her relationship with Bai Xiaowen, not with Yuan Shi, and deepen her understanding. If there was a chance, she wanted to tell Bai Xiaowen that she liked him and not Yuan Shi's identity. Unfortunately, Jiangnan was pacified too quickly. Jinmi didn't get a chance to carry out her plan. Now that the world was at peace, Jinmi was the empress. What she was most afraid of was that Bai Xiaowen would suddenly become a monk and seek immortality. In particular, Gu Xian's arrival 2 days ago made Jinmi feel a great crisis. Tonight, Jinmi pretended to misunderstand that Bai Xiaowen had an unmentionable disease. She also put in a lot of effort to make Bai Xiaowen prove to her that he didn't have an unmentionable disease, and at the same time, get pregnant with a dragon seed as soon as possible. Once a man and a woman had an in-depth communication, many things would not be so abrupt. The news of the Great Unification could not be mentioned to the Aborigines. Otherwise, they would suffer a 4-point priority penalty. Bai Xiaowen didn't talk about the Great Unification. When Jinmi asked, he admitted that he was an outsider and that Yuan Shi had already encountered a fierce tiger when he was in Yuzhou. He was scared to death and replaced Yuan Shi's identity. After Jinmi heard this, she showed a hint of sadness and said, "I already guessed it. Before my husband went on the expedition to Sichuan, I secretly burned incense to commemorate my late husband. This concubine has the appearance of a willow tree. I only hope that my husband won't dislike me." Bai Xiaowen sighed and said, "When I leave, I'll take you with me. I'm just worried that you won't be willing to follow me because you're reluctant to be the empress." Jinmi said, "If my husband wants to leave, I also don't want to stay in the palace and be a living dead person. From now on, no matter which famous mountain you go to cultivate Tao, I'm willing to follow you and take care of your meals and daily life." Bai Xiaowen stood up and said seriously, "Are you serious?" Jinmi also stood up. Ignoring the falling brocade quilt, she said seriously, "My husband is the most perfect man I've ever seen. You're benevolent, wise, and just. Regardless of whether you're rich or poor, I only recognize you as a person, not an external object. I'm not as good as you say." Bai Xiaowen was a little embarrassed. Jinmi said, "My husband is benevolent to the people and reduces taxes. Understanding the situation and coming up with all kinds of wonderful plans is wisdom. Sweeping through the 6 directions and the 8 wastelands is a hero. Bowing to the sun and visiting Tiangong in prison is a mistake. Not indulging in women and keeping a jade body is right. Letting go of Liu Bei and returning Zhao Yun is righteous. From this point of view, my husband is really a benevolent, wise, and just gentleman. These words are not enough to describe my husband." Bai Xiaowen felt comfortable all over. Jinmi's flattery sounded 10 times better than Dong Zhao, Hua Xian, and the others. "The world is beyond my reach." Bai Xiaowen took out the wishing tree fruit. He chose the magician's wish and copied the follower contract. Then, he handed it to Jinmi. Jinmi signed the contract without hesitation and became Bai Xiaowen's second follower. It feels a little special. Jinmi closed her eyes slightly. She could feel that Bai Xiaowen was right in front of her. This was a spiritual connection. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, "All right. Now, it's time to let you know where I came from and how this world. Yes, this world will change. The amount of information is a little too much. I'll tell you the specific content through spiritual power transmission." Bai Xiaowen placed one hand on Jinmi's forehead. Scenes and images were transmitted into her mind. The real world, Earth. There were many planes in the spirit world, and the three kingdoms were only one of them. The awakened ones, the natives, after the unification, the reincarnation of the plane world was reshaped. When Bai Xiaowen removed his palm, Jinmi was still sitting in a daze, as if she had not come back to her senses. Bai Xiaowen could understand that Jinmi could not accept so much information in a short period of time and could not give him any feedback. However, it would be fine in a while. After a long while, Jinmi finally came back to her senses and said, "This is what my husband told me, true?" Bai Xiaowen nodded. "Then this world, my parents, my elder brother, will they disappear after the unification?" Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "I'm not very sure about how the plane world will operate after the unification. But now, most people know that the unification means the reincarnation of reincarnation. The next time the Three Kingdoms plane opens, your parents and elder brother will appear again, but they will no longer remember you." Chapter 1385. Jinmi was stunned for a moment before she said, "Then, will I be in the Three Kingdoms next time?" Bai Xiaowen had already inquired about this matter, so he answered, "No, not anymore. You won't appear again in the future, unless..." Bai Xiaowen paused for a moment. Jinmi was very smart. She pointed at the tip of her nose and said, "Unless I die?" Bai Xiaowen nodded. Jinmi said again, "Husband, can you accept my parents and brothers as your followers?" Bai Xiaowen slowly shook his head. "The wishing tree fruit that I gave you just now is worth at least 1,000,000 spirit energy points, and it's priceless. You still don't know the concept of 1,000,000 spirit energy points, but you can understand it as the sum of the wealth of the entire Ji province. In addition, even if you have money and have extra wishing tree fruits or follower contracts, it's difficult to recruit your parents and brothers as your followers. They and I lack understanding." Jinmi was shocked and said, "I was ignorant." "Husband, don't be embarrassed. Here, let's talk about the problem of subduing the natives of the spirit world. In the past, there were people who took in the natives of the spirit world as their followers, but they were natives with extremely little influence, such as some commonplace deputy generals, and so on. Bai Xiaowen took in Jinmi this time. This was because Jinmi was Yuan Shao's daughter-in-law and Cao Cao's daughter-in-law. She was also the empress of the Great Wei dynasty. She was also a rare leader. The difficulty was more than 10 times higher than taking in a deputy general. The more powerful and valuable the natives were, the greater their influence in the spirit world, and the harder it was to subdue them. Bai Xiaowen had unified the Three Kingdoms and become the emperor of the Great Yan dynasty. He had countless loyal officials and fierce generals under his command. These people all recognized the identity of the emperor of the Great Yan dynasty, Yuan Shi, and not the identity of the awakened Bai Xiaowen. To take in natives as followers, he had to be honest with them about his identity as an awakened, but he could not reveal the information about the grand unification of reincarnation. The level 4 punishment triggered was no joke. Why did he have to let them know that he was an awakened? Because of the follower contract, even if the other party had the slightest doubt during the process of establishing the contract, it would be magnified and increase the probability of failure. The influential aborigines usually had their own principles and perseverance. Even if he had been tricked into becoming a follower for a while, after discovering that he had been tricked, he would definitely feel resentful and rebellious. This was a violation of the absolute obedience principle of the follower contract. The follower would be killed on the spot. For example, if someone used the identity of Liu Bei to enter the company, not to mention how unrealistic this identity was, and wanted to subdue Guan Yu or Zhang Fei. He said to Guan Yu, "Second brother, come, I'll show you a treasure. Sign here. Guan Yu might do it because Liu Bei was his sworn brother. But Guan Yu, who had become a follower, would quickly discover that something was wrong and find out the truth. His brother, Liu Bei, was dead, and the person in front of him was an imposter. Naturally, Guan Yu was infuriated and wanted to chop him up. The moment Guan Yu had this thought, he would be killed by the contract. In the next reincarnation, Guan Yu would appear again. Then, this awakened who used the identity of Liu Bei to enter the company would end up with a precious and rare follower contract in vain. According to Bai Xiaowen's estimation, a Lord-level follower contract would be at least a level A gold item. It was also possible that it was a level S gold item. Unless this awakened had told Guan Yu in advance, "I'm not your brother. Your brother died a long time ago. I'm the awakened XXX. If you follow me in the future, we'll adventure in different planes of existence." Only then could he avoid the reverse psychology after signing the contract. But if he did that, Guan Yu might just chop him up. This awakened couldn't tell Guan Yu that every time your world was unified, it was a reincarnation reconstruction. Only by following me can you get rid of the reincarnation cycle. The information about the unification was only level 1 for awakened followers, but it was level 4 for the natives. Perhaps some people would say that after tricking him into signing a contract and becoming a follower, they would tell him about the unification and reincarnation reconstruction to eliminate his reverse psychology. It wasn't that no one thought this way, but the result was always he. This was a paradox in itself. If you tricked the natives into becoming followers, the moment they realized that they had been tricked, they would have a reverse psychology and trigger the contract to be erased. How efficient was the rule of the spiritual realm? It wouldn't give you much time to talk. In other words, the awakened had to use the short 10 days in the spiritual realm, the longest was 1 or 2 months, to attract the natives with their charisma and ability. They had to sincerely follow them without cutting into their identity. It was easy to imagine how difficult this was. Jinmi signed the follower contract so readily without any suspicion. She thought that it was very simple. Bai Xiaowen had done a lot in the 3 kingdoms for less than half a year. How strong were his abilities and charisma? It was normal for Jinmi to be attracted to him. Now that Jinmi had become a follower, Bai Xiaowen didn't have to be secretive. After Jinmi digested this information, she confirmed, "My husband, your surname is Bai, and your name is Shang Xiaowen, right?" Bai Xiaowen nodded. Jinmi smiled and said, "I'll just call you my husband in the future. I'm not used to calling you by your name." Bai Xiaowen didn't mind. After all, Cecilia had always called him Dior. Jinmi said again, "My husband, do you have any plans for your seclusion this time?" Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "I have a chance to solve the mystery of a strange object in this plane. This is also the arrangement I made on the path of Taoism when I unified the world. Now it's time to reap the rewards." And Bai Xiaowen glanced at the black soul stone and shook his head with a smile. "Forget it. In short, I have to go to Crane Mountain this time. Next, I'll leave a Taoist incarnation in Yedu as a decoration to prevent the world from falling into chaos." Jinmi said, "I'm just a woman. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to maintain the court." Bai Xiaowen said, "You don't have to worry. I still have several teammates. They're all awakened ones who followed me into this world. They're now in charge of the Imperial Guards or the Imperial Guards. They can keep you safe. In addition, Tianfeng and Zhu Shou are loyal ministers. Zhang He and the other generals are also praiseworthy. Now that the world is unified, the people are thinking about governance. There won't be any chaos in the short term." "Hey!" A faint voice sounded. Jinmi was startled. Then, she saw Li Shi on the beam. "Li. General Li, when did you come in?" Li Shi said faintly, "I've been here for a long time. I didn't expect you to have such a good figure, Hero Luo." Jinmi hurriedly pulled up the quilt to cover her body. She couldn't restrain the embarrassment on her face. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "She came when you signed the follower contract. I secretly asked for her opinion. It's just that you didn't know." Chapter 1386. Bai Xiaowen had been diligently cultivating Taoist techniques for the past few days and had consumed a lot of energy. Therefore, he took a nap. Therefore, such a strange scene appeared in the bedchamber. Bai Xiaowen was sleeping. Jinmi stole glances at Bai Xiaowen. Li Shi stole glances at Jinmi. Jinmi said softly, "I didn't expect my husband's real appearance to be so good-looking. I can't pick out a single flaw." Li Shi said sullenly, "Yes, he's very good-looking." "What a womanizer." Jinmi asked, sisterly, "You've followed your husband through many battles, so you've seen more than me. Have you seen any other handsome men?" Li Shi nodded. "I've seen a few. Ma Chao, Zhao Yun, and Sun Tzu are all very handsome. But in terms of appearance, Zhou Yu should be the most handsome. How do these people compare to my husband?" Jinmi began to explore and learn. Li Shi thought for a while. If you compare them numerically, Ma Chao's appearance is equivalent to 0. 1. Sun Tzu's is 0. 2. Zhao Yun's is 0. 3. Zhou Yu's is about 0. For 38, Jinmi asked curiously, "Does my husband's appearance count as 1? Li Shi smiled and shook his head. "It's 100. Jinmi, Li Shi leaned against the headboard in distress and looked sideways at the flickering red candles. "Although he's good-looking, he has a lot of troubles. There are always shameless women coming to him. I can't drive them away." I'm not talking about you." "Jinmi," Li Shi waved his hand. "I'm just reminding you. Don't be silly and choose concubines for him. You have to change this mindset of yours. Otherwise, you'll suffer in the future." Jinmi said, "It's normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Moreover, my husband is such a hero. Which woman in the world doesn't love him? Sisterly, don't be jealous. You'll only lose your husband's favor." Li Shi said anxiously, "He has 3 now." Jinmi was relieved. "I thought there were 30 of them. Is there a need to make such a fuss?" Immediately, Jinmi asked curiously, "Which 3? Li Shi counted, "You, me, and the one with the pseudonym Bai Sanyang is actually a Western region woman named Cecilia. She's also his follower." "Foreign woman from the Western regions?" Jinmi frowned and said, "Foreign women are ugly and ferocious, like Rakshasa ghosts. How could my husband like them?" Li Shi stuck out her tongue. "Don't let Sister Sai hear you. Sister Sai is pretty and has a good figure." Jinmi shook his head. "Those who are not of our race are bound to have different intentions. How can a foreign woman be worthy of a hero like my husband?" "That's right. You're right. You don't know the ways of the saints." "Wait, let's not talk about this first." Li Shi seemed to have thought of something and suddenly became energetic. He nodded seriously. "I agree with you. Foreign women can't be our sisters. However, since we already have one, let's forget about it. Our focus is on prevention. Jinmi looked at Li Shi in confusion. Li Shi whispered a few words in her ear. Jinmi was shocked. "What?" "Then Han Chi." "Shoo," Li Shi put a finger to her lips. "Lower your voice. Anyway, you understand, right? Those 2 foreign women have always been thinking about our old husband. We can't give them a chance. I'll leave this important task to you." Jinmi thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. Li Shi felt a little guilty. "Why are you laughing?" Jinmi said, sisterly, "Actually, we just need to capture our husband's heart. Why do we have to care about foreign women? Do you think a foreign woman can pose a threat to us? When it comes to men, the more you hold on to them and the more you control them, the easier it is to lose them. When the time comes and you lose your love for your husband, what's the use of stopping the foreign women? That's all I have to say. You should understand it well." After that, Jinmi lay down beside Bai Xiaowen and closed her eyes to sleep. Li Shi muttered in his heart for a while. The next day, Bai Xiaowen announced the removal of the 3 dukes and the replacement of the position of Prime Minister. All state affairs would be handled by the Prime Minister. Tianfeng became Great Yan's first prime minister. Like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples, the officials all remonstrated, hoping that His Majesty would prioritize state affairs. Even Tianfeng tried his best to be modest, hoping that Bai Xiaowen would personally handle the state affairs. Bai Xiaowen decisively refused, which could be considered as being willful. Although Tianfeng was a little dissatisfied with Bai Xiaowen's laziness, he was still very touched by Bai Xiaowen's trust in him. Immediately, he busied himself with building up his government and appointing subordinate officials. He pushed the series of good policies that Bai Xiaowen had formulated to all the provinces and counties. It was still the same saying. The chaotic era had just ended, and the population had dropped from 50 to 60 million to a few million. The people of Huaxiao were the most hardworking and kind, and they had high tolerance. As long as the ruling class didn't cause trouble, governing without doing anything was an excellent policy. If they could reduce taxes, then it was simply the best policy. With such an environment, even if there were officials who wanted to rebel, they didn't have the support of the public. Due to Bai Xiaowen's repeated victories, his prestige in the army was extremely high, and no one dared to rebel. Bai Xiaowen then left behind a Taoist spell clone to cultivate in the quiet room of the palace. Then, he left the Raven Messenger in Qiao Rui's hands in Yadu so that they could contact each other at any time. After making preparations, he spent 100 spiritual energy points to change into an ordinary Confucian scholar's disguise and went to the pavilion in the southwest of Yadu. In the pavilion, Bai Xiaowen met the Zhuoxi for the first time. The Zhuoxi's attire was similar to the one described in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. He wore a white vine crown on his head and a green lazy robe. However, his eyes and legs were not blind and lame like in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Instead, they were intact. After Gu Xian introduced him, Bai Xiaowen and the Zhuoxi greeted each other and used insight. However, this insight seemed to have been thrown into thin air. It directly passed through the Zhuoxi in front of him, and he didn't receive any feedback. Bai Xiaowen was slightly surprised. He had encountered such a situation before. When he explored some undeveloped treasure spaces on Earth, he would sometimes encounter such a situation, such as the White Ghost region. The insight couldn't pinpoint the target. The Zhuoxi seemed to have sensed something. He glanced at Bai Xiaowen and said with a smile, "Gu Xian once said that your majesty is a sincere gentleman. Now that I've met you today, I can see that you are indeed handsome and outstanding." Bai Xiaowen saw that the Zhuoxi was pointing at him. He understood and said with a smile, "Immortal Zhuo, we are both cultivators. There's no need to address me with a secular status." The Zhuoxi nodded slightly, "Then I will overstep and call you young master." Bai Xiaowen agreed. The Zhuoxi said, "Young master, although you have committed a lot of killing, you have contributed greatly to the country. If not for this, I and my disciple wouldn't have interacted with you. This trip to Crane Mountain requires the help of a human emperor's luck. Young master is indispensable." Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "The world has been settled, and my wish has been fulfilled. If I wasn't worried that the world would panic if I abdicated, I wouldn't be so attached to this honor. When my son comes of age, I will pass the throne to the crown prince and live in seclusion." Chapter 1387. Zhuoxi nodded and praised, "You don't admire power and position, and you retreat in the face of danger. Only a kind and wise man can do that." Bai Xiaowen had already guessed some details about Zhuoxi after their first conversation. Zhuoxi was known as one of the three immortals at the end of the Han Dynasty. His cultivation was so high that even insight couldn't capture it. His strength was unpredictable. However, judging from his words and attitude, he hadn't transcended samsara. He didn't know that Bai Xiaowen's goal was only to unify the world, and he didn't know what it meant to the Aborigines. Then Zhuoxi took Gu Xian and Bai Xiaowen to Crane Mountain using the instant escape skill. Gu Xian said that his master Zhuoxi was good at escape skill, and it was true. In the blink of an eye, the three of them had arrived at the Sword Garret and Ijo from the pavilion in the southwest of Yadu. However, Zhuoxi seemed to have consumed a lot of energy. He sat cross-legged under a stone mountain in the southwest of the Sword Garret and adjusted chi circulation for a while. Bai Xiaowen whispered to Guxian, "Doesn't immortals we use escape skill often? Why is he so tired?" Guxian said, "If he was alone, he wouldn't have consumed so much energy. But he took you and me with him. There's a saying in Taoism that carrying a mortal is as heavy as a mountain, because the mortal body is heavy and turbid." Bai Xiaowen nodded to show that he understood. Looking at Zhuo who was meditating, Bai Xiaowen secretly wondered if Zhuo could help him achieve his goal. About 4 hours later, Zhuo recovered. The three of them walked into the mountain together. Crane Mountain was about 1,000 meters above sea level and covered an area of about 60 or 70 kilometers. It wasn't a big mountain, but there were clouds and mist between the foothills and the mountainside. Bai Xiaowen wanted to ride the white eagle and fly like a mountain, but Zhuo and his disciples stopped him. They didn't give a reason, only saying that they couldn't. There was a Taoist temple at the front of the mountain. In a time of war, the commoners had no food to eat. How would they have the spare money to support the monks? As a result, the Taoist temple was rather dilapidated. There were less than 10 Taoists who were farming and harvesting their own crops, barely managing to maintain their livelihood. Passing by the Taoist temple, Bai Xiaowen used his insight and found that these Taoist priests were just ordinary civilians in the spiritual realm. Obviously, they were not real Taoist cultivators because of the name of Crane Mountain and became monks in this Taoist temple. Zhuo and Guxian had no interest in communicating with these fake comrades. They used a camouflage spell and the three of them passed through the courtyard and went straight to the back of the mountain. At the entrance of the back mountain, he saw a stone tablet first. The stone tablet was about a meter tall, with the words Xingyi engraved on the front, the way of Meng Wei on the right, and Zhang Fuan on the left. Guxian whispered to Bai Xiaowen, "This is the stone tablet Zhang Daoling erected 60 years ago when he created the Tao of Righteous Alliance. There are also Zhang Daoling's carvings in front. Young master, please follow me to take a look." Bai Xiaowen followed Zhuo and Guxian into the Heaven Valley in front of them. He saw the stone carvings left by Zhang Daoling on the mountain wall. Zhang Daoling's stone carvings were very simple. They only briefly explain the reason for the establishment of the sect. Bai Xiaowen was not interested in this historical knowledge. Later on, Zhang Daoling mentioned that there were 3 grotto heavens in Crane Mountain. This was the place that contained the key information of Crane Mountain's instance dungeon. Guxian said, "Master, this should be the Heaven Valley of the first grotto heaven, where Zhang Daoling lived." Looking at the words on the stone carvings, the second grotto heaven is where Zhou lived. Then, the innermost grotto heaven might be where the pre-Qin Qi practitioner Guang Qingzi lived. That should be our destination. Zhuo nodded slightly. Zhou was an immortal of the pre-Han dynasty. There might be scriptures in his grotto heaven that we can learn from. The three of them continued to walk along the passage of the Heaven Valley. The passage became narrower and narrower. In the end, only one person could pass through. The three of them entered one after another. Guxian was the first, Zhuo was the second, and Bai Xiaowen was the third. When Bai Xiaowen squeezed through, he saw that the clouds in front of him were endless. The figures of Zhuo and Guxian had disappeared. Is this a spatial dislocation? No. There's no feeling of weightlessness. Bai Xiaowen frowned. He had come here by relying on Zhuo. He thought that he would not have to waste his energy at all with Zhuo around. But now, it seemed that it was not that simple. The clouds were pervasive. From time to time, tall black figures would appear and disappear. Bai Xiaowen tried to use his spiritual power to search. However, as soon as his spiritual power came into contact with the clouds, it was absorbed by the clouds like a sponge absorbing water. He could not search at all. Bai Xiaowen was so frightened that he quickly retracted his spiritual power. In just a moment, he had lost more than 30 points of spiritual power. If this continues for a little longer, my spiritual power will be exhausted. Then, I'll faint here. Bai Xiaowen hesitated for a moment, but still took a step toward the clouds. With this step, the narrow mountain path behind Bai Xiaowen suddenly disappeared into the clouds. There's no way out. Bai Xiaowen had already read the Taiping scripture. In fact, he already had some understanding of the Tao. It was just that he did not know it. Seeing the clouds in front of him and the disappearance of the mountain path behind him, Bai Xiaowen understood the purpose of this level's design. In front of him was an endless unknown land. It symbolized the realm of the Tao. As a cultivator, if he did not dare to take this step into the unknown, although he could save his life, he would be lost in the crowd and lose the opportunity to pursue the Tao. After taking this step, there was no way out. It meant that once one stepped onto the path of a cultivator, there was no turning back. Unless one attained the Tao, they would not be able to step into the moral world. There's still fog and black shadows in front. It means that exploring the realm of the Tao is dangerous at every step. Bai Xiaowen identified a direction and took a step forward. The ground in front of him rumbled and shook. A black shadow moved quickly toward him. Bai Xiaowen was shocked. He took a closer look and realized that it was a stone statue. However, this stone statue seemed to have come alive at this moment. It threw a punch at Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen used insight. Yellow Rock Strongman, Boss Level 10, Race, Construct, Attributes, STR-132, DX55, STR-132, STR-0, Skill 1, Knock, Passive. The Yellow Rock Strongman's normal attack will cause a small knockback effect to enemies whose strength is lower than its own. There's also a certain probability of causing dizziness. Skill 2, Sturdy Wall, Passive. The Yellow Rock Strongman's physical damage will be reduced by 30% and its armor will be doubled. Skill 3, Taoist Rhyme, Passive. The Yellow Rock Strongman's magical damage will be reduced by 30% and its magic resistance will be doubled. Skill 4, Bond, Passive. For every Yellow Rock Strongman in the battlefield, the Yellow Rock Strongman's attributes will be increased by 10%. Skill 5, River Diagram Formation, Master the Yellow Rock Strongman's health will be increased by 800 points. Bai Xiaowen hurriedly took a step back. At the same time, he summoned the Wrath Claw and charged toward the Yellow Rock Strongman. Chapter 1388. Why did another one suddenly appear? Could it be because I summoned the Wrath Claw? Bai Xiaowen's mind raced. If summoning the Wrath Claw had caused the second Yellowstone Strongman to appear, then this dungeon was too much of a scam. Didn't summoners rely on their advantage in numbers? Is your Crane Mountain Taoist ancestral court targeting me, Fat Tiger? Bai Xiaowen cursed in his heart, but he did not dare to summon any other creatures. In the past, he could enjoy the thrill of ganging up on opponents, but now, he could only fight fair one-on-one. Bai Xiaowen could only feel extremely lucky that he had not rashly released all the summoned creatures from the Black Spirit Stone. Otherwise, this would be a huge problem. The Wrath Claw did not fight the first Yellowstone Strongman head-on. It turned to the side and clawed at it. Stone chips flew everywhere, and the Yellowstone Strongman only suffered minimal damage. The second Yellowstone Strongman did not seem to bend or stretch its legs, but the soles of its feet seemed to be equipped with pulleys. It slid over and suddenly hammered down with its arm. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and predicted in advance, dodging the attack. These two Yellowstone Strongmen were just tough to kill because of their thick skin and flesh. Their attack power was not very high. Ordinary people might be frightened by their astonishing strength of 130 plus, but one had to look at the essence of the problem. The Yellowstone Strongmen's legs could not move. They could only rely on the pulleys on their feet to slide and turn. In terms of body movement, which was their ability to dodge, they were much weaker than ordinary enemies. Although their arms could attack, their elbows could not be bent or extended. There was only one way to attack. With the Yellow Rock Strongmen's turns and glides in several directions, Bai Xiaowen could completely simulate several types of punches that they would use to attack, thus predicting and avoiding them in advance. To be honest, the Yellowstone Strongmen's attack power was much worse than that of real people. Of course, even if they were two punching bags, it would not be easy to deal with them. Bai Xiaowen divided his attention. While shooting and dodging, he also controlled the Wrath Claw to predict and dodge. The deterrence skill was not very useful because the two Yellowstone strongmen were of the boss tier. The deterrence skill would only work on targets with a lower tier. It had nothing to do with priority. Although Bai Xiaowen currently had the same priority as a lord, he was still a hero. After grinding for a long time, the two Yellowstone strongmen were finally killed by the Desert Eagle's continuous shots and the occasional true damage from bloodlust. However, after the Yellow Rock strongman died, it only turned into a pile of rubble and did not drop any treasure chests. Bai Xiaowen shook his head helplessly and asked Wrathclaw to leave. The Wrathclaw suddenly ran to the two piles of rubble and sniffed it. From one of the piles of rubble, it picked up a slightly glowing piece and gave it to Bai Xiaowen. Good job. Bai Xiaowen did not want to dampen the Wrathclaw's enthusiasm, so he took the glowing piece and looked at it. Bai Xiaowen knew that this glowing piece did not drop from a monster treasure chest, nor was it a quest reward. According to the rules of the spiritual realm, he did not have the rights to it and could not take it away. As expected, this glowing piece only had a simple description. Immortal crystal fragment, unknown mysterious item. Unable to be taken out of the spiritual realm. Bai Xiaowen put away this piece of fragment for the time being. Bai Xiaowen looked around at the dense fog. He frowned and began to think. Where should I go next? Just now, the Yellowstone strongman had a skill called the river diagram formation. This means that this formation is related to the river diagram in the Book of Luo. The more famous corresponding formation is the Nine Palace diagram. In the Nine Palace diagram, 2 and 4 are the shoulders, 6 and 8 are the feet, 3, 6 and 7 on the left, 9 on the right, 5 in the center. Bai Xiaowen recalled that when he first entered, only one Yellowstone strongman had appeared. Did this mean that he had first set foot in the Nine Palace diagram's first step? Then, due to the Wrathclaw's appearance, the formation had determined that there were 2 units. Therefore, the difficulty of this Nine Palace diagram had doubled. If this was the case, he should walk forward to the left and then walk straight forward. He would encounter 3 on the left and 4 on the shoulder respectively, so it was not too difficult. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had to put away the Wrathclaw. If he took the wrong path and ended up in the Nine Palace diagram with 7 or more, it would be terrifying. Although the Yellowstone strongmen only had one attack pattern, when their numbers were stacked, it was very troublesome. A group of Yellowstone strongmen surrounded you and beat you to death with their punches, leaving no room for you to dodge. Moreover, there was the terrifying skill bond. For every Yellowstone strongman that appeared, all the Yellowstone strongmen's attributes would increase by 10%. If there were more than 7 Yellowstone strongmen, the Yellowstone strongmen's strength would soar to 200 points, and their dexterity would also exceed 100 points. No matter how Bai Xiaowen predicted, it was impossible for him to dodge such a powerful melee attack. Although I'm not completely sure that my idea is correct, it seems that I have no other choice. I know too little about the Crane Mountain Ancestral Court, so I can't make any other choice. Bai Xiaowen put away the Wrathclaw and walked toward the fog in front of him. The fog in front of him was getting thicker and thicker, as if it had become elastic. Bai Xiaowen spent a lot of effort to squeeze in. Then, he suddenly heard a pop sound, as if he had broken through some kind of barrier, and the fog returned to normal. Black shadows flashed, and 3 Yellowstone strongmen glided and came in front of Bai Xiaowen. There really are 3 of them. Bai Xiaowen did not dare to summon the Wrathclaw this time. The increase in combat power brought by the Wrathclaw was completely incomparable to the increase in combat power of the 3 Yellow Scarf strongmen. Bai Xiaowen could only use the Peace Talisman, Imprisonment Talisman to first imprison one of the Yellowstone strongmen, then maintain the infusion of mental power to seal the opponent's ability to move. Then, he dodged the attacks of the other 2 Yellowstone strongmen while raising his gun to shoot. This time, Bai Xiaowen did not dare to use his continuous shooting mode because the Imprisonment Talisman was constantly depleting his mental power. If one often walked by the river, one's shoes would eventually get wet. Bai Xiaowen's dexterity was not high either. In the end, he was hit by a Yellowstone strongman's hammer, which triggered the stun rate. The peace talisman was broken. The second and third Yellowstone strongmen surrounded him. Fortunately, he had the passive effect of sincere heart, so the stun rate was very short. Bai Xiaowen did not wait for the second punch to come. He regained his ability to move, activated his shoes, and rushed out. At the same time, he expended 5 points of elemental energy to leave behind a Dao spell illusion. The 3 Yellowstone strongmen surrounded the Dao spell illusion and beat it up. Boom, boom, boom. The Dao spell illusion dissipated in the waves, but it bought Bai Xiaowen a lot of time to adjust his battle strategy. Since the Dao spell illusion works, what about the Dao spell puppet control? Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and used the grass claw sect's ancient martial art, profound meaning, heavenly soar of clouds. Streaks of blazing flames broke out of the ground and sent all 3 Yellowstone strongmen flying. Bai Xiaowen aimed at the most heavily injured Yellowstone strongman and opened his palm. He combined his elemental energy with a wisp of thought and transmitted it, trying to control the Yellowstone strongman's movements. Chapter 1389. A strand of thought was transmitted into the Yellow Rock strongman's body, and the latter's movements suddenly became sluggish. Before Bai Xiaowen could rejoice, he felt a huge rebound force burst out from the Yellow Rock strongman's body. His strand of thought was directly ejected. As a result, Bai Xiaowen received 200+ true damage. It was a counterattack from the mysterious power within the Yellow Rock strongman's body. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen had activated his shield in advance the moment his thought was ejected and suffered the counterattack. The shield of the purple ribbon cloud brocade robe kept his HP healthy, and he was not inexplicably crippled. True damage ignored armor and magic resistance, but without special instructions, it would not ignore the value of the shield. However, this risky move of Bai Xiaowen's had its benefits as well. The Yellow Rock strongman that had just been invaded by the puppet-controlled Dao technique was obviously much slower and stiffer. Bai Xiaowen hurriedly seized the opportunity and activated Blood Rage. With the strength increase of the Ring of Pain, he opened up the Desert Eagle's continuous shooting. Withstanding the pressure of the other 2 intact Yellow Rock strongmen, he shattered the sluggish Yellow Rock strongman. Then, he slowly killed the other 2. After fighting for more than 10 minutes, Bai Xiaowen's mental strength was exhausted before he successfully killed the 2 Yellow Rock strongmen. Damn it! Bai Xiaowen cursed. With his current strength, if he could summon all his summoned creatures, not to mention 3 Yellow Rock strongmen, even if there were 2 more, Bai Xiaowen could still deal with them. He would not be in such a sorry state like he was now. However, this Taoist ancestral court judged the activation of the Yellow Rock strongmen based on the number of invaders. It was really unfriendly for summoners. This Crane Mountain Taoist ancestral court instance dungeon is probably prepared for the top awakened of the Taoist priest profession in Huaxia. Bai Xiaowen sat on the ground. While recovering his mental strength, he was also thinking silently. If it's a professional Taoist priest, his mastery of puppet control will definitely be far superior to a newbie like me. He might be able to pass easily. Of course, even if he was not a Taoist priest, as long as he was strong enough, he should be able to pass. Summoners like Bai Xiaowen generally had no chance. However, Bai Xiaowen was different from other summoners. Even if he didn't summon any creatures, he was still very strong. Not to mention the luxurious equipment, just in order to control the summoned creatures, the combat, shooting, and other specialties were the skills of a top-level awakened. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen believed that he still had a chance to pass the Yellow Rock strongman's test, as long as his deduction was not wrong. After resting for a while, Bai Xiaowen's condition was back to full. He searched through the 3 piles of rubble and found another immortal crystal fragment. Bai Xiaowen proceeded in a straight line according to the predetermined route. After passing through another layer of membrane-like fog, he arrived at the 3rd grid. Just as Bai Xiaowen thought, there were 4 Yellowstone strongmen here. Every single Yellowstone strongman had a 40% increase in all their attributes. With his previous experience, Bai Xiaowen had already figured out the countermeasures. The first step was to create illusions. The illusions in Bai Xiaowen's real body each attracted 2 Yellowstone strongmen. Bai Xiaowen ran and adjusted his position slightly, and the second illusion attacked. This was also the advantage of self-taught heavenly book skills. As long as his elemental energy could keep up, in theory, the cooldown time could be reduced to a few seconds. At this time, the only thing that limited Bai Xiaowen from continuously using Taoist techniques was the burden on his body. Of course, the elemental energy recovery speed was very slow, and this was a big problem. The 2 illusions bought Bai Xiaowen some time. He brazenly threw out the first puppet control Taoist technique. The familiar feeling of the recoil came again. At the price of receiving 200 points of true damage, Bai Xiaowen succeeded in slowing down a Yellowstone strongman. The remaining value of the magic cloud shield basically disappeared. Bai Xiaowen checked his maximum HP. He had a total of 445 points. That's enough. Bai Xiaowen muttered to himself. Then, he ran and cast the third illusion Taoist technique, followed by the second puppet control Taoist technique. Another Yellowstone strongman was slowed down. Bai Xiaowen's HP dropped to around 60%. Blood Essence Stone, Bloodthirst, Life Compensation. Bai Xiaowen's HP quickly rose by 33%. Then, he repeated the same moves. Running, Illusion Taoist Technique, and Puppet Control Taoist Technique. The third Yellowstone strongman was slowed down. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath. The continuous true damage from the recoil was not only a decrease in his HP, but also a test of his willpower. Every time he was hit by a recoil, it was as uncomfortable as being punched in the temple. The necklace around Bai Xiaowen's neck glowed. The additional skill of Judge's Determination, Shelter, was activated, and another layer of shield with 141 points of absorption was created. Then, the last Yellowstone strongman was slowed down by Bai Xiaowen's puppet control Taoist technique. At this time, Bai Xiaowen had not caused any damage to the enemy. However, his 63 points of elemental energy had been depleted to 11 points, and his HP was less than 200 points. The magic cloud shield, which was cast once a day, had completely disappeared. The 1/3 of his HP stored in the Blood Essence Stone was also depleted. However, Bai Xiaowen had also achieved a satisfactory result as he had expected. All 4 Yellowstone strongmen were slowed down. They were no longer a threat. Bai Xiaowen himself had suffered more than 800 true damage. Under the stimulation of the pain, his strength was close to 120 points. Blood Rage, activate. He raised the Desert Eagle and aimed at the Yellowstone strongman's heart. It was also the location of the fairy crystal fragment. Yellowstone strongmen were different from ordinary creatures. The head was not a vital point. The heart, which was engraved with an array and embedded with the fairy crystal, was the vital point. This shot caused more than 900 true damage from bloodlust. What was the Yellowstone strongman's total HP, or its overall durability? After the 40% increase in attributes, its constitution was 168 points. The river diagram array, proficient, gave it an additional 800 HP. It had a total of 2,480 HP. The result of the shot was that the Yellowstone strongman directly exploded into a pile of rubble. Bai Xiaowen gasped for breath. Although 900 plus actual damage was within his calculations, Bai Xiaowen still wanted to scold him for being overpowered. Just now, Bai Xiaowen had activated Blood Rage. With the penetrating effect, headshot effect, and first blood effect, the theoretical damage had exceeded 2,000. It was actually reduced to less than 1,000 by the damage reduction. One had to know that Bai Xiaowen's shot just now ignored armor and had a critical hit of 2.5 times. Moreover, the additional bloodlust was true damage. One could imagine how tough these Yellowstone strongmen were. After killing the first one, Bai Xiaowen quickly activated rapid fire mode. As he moved around, he poured bullets on the remaining Yellowstone strongmen. Chapter 1390. Plop. The last Yellowstone strongman turned into rubble. Bai Xiaowen felt extremely tired. He had used up all his cards. Fortunately, the third 9 palaces grid should be the last level. Bai Xiaowen searched through the 4 piles of rubble and found an immortal crystal fragment. It was worth mentioning that no matter how many Yellowstone strongmen appeared, there was only 1 immortal crystal fragment in each grid. So far, Bai Xiaowen had collected a total of 3 immortal crystal fragments. I can't take it out of the 3 kingdoms plane, so it's basically useless to me. But since it's an unknown mysterious object, maybe I can exchange it with Sui. This was Bai Xiaowen's plan. After all, the name Immortal Crystal Fragment sounded very grand. After resting, Bai Xiaowen recovered to his peak state and walked straight ahead. After taking 60 or 70 steps, the thick fog in front of him dissipated. "Young master, you finally came out of the array." Gu Xian's voice came. Bai Xiaowen looked up. This was a huge stone cave, like a residential area. There were stone beds, stone chairs, and some simple living utensils, but they were all covered in dust. The farthest end of the stone cave seemed to be a passage, but the entrance was a dark golden door. In front of the dark golden door stood Sui and Gu Xian, master and disciple. Obviously, they had been waiting for a long time. Bai Xiaowen looked back with lingering fear. He glanced at the lingering clouds behind him and said, "What kind of array is this? It's a bit too dangerous." Gu Xian said, "This should be the array diagram left by Master Immortal Guangqingzi. It's derived from the He Tu and Luo Shu. It's just a trap array, not a killing array." Later, the former Han cultivator Zhou Yishan modified the array and matched the stone man with the array diagram. He wanted to make later people retreat and not disturb his cultivation. Bai Xiaowen said, "Such a powerful stone man, and it's not a killing array? If it were someone weaker, they would have been beaten into a pancake by the Yellowstone strongmen." Gu Xian laughed, "This is really not a killing formation. Even if Zhou Yishan modified the array formation, it was only to prevent others from entering, not to kill. If you can't defeat the stone men in this formation, just turn around and leave." Bai Xiaowen was stunned. So they could turn around directly? He had never tried it before. Bai Xiaowen suddenly thought of something and said, "Taoist priest, aren't you and old immortals will worry that I can't defeat the stone man and walk out of the formation?" Gu Xian shook his head. "I'm not worried." Bai Xiaowen. "Could it be that you guys have predicted that I would definitely be able to get out of the array?" Gu Xian smiled and said, "Young master's fate is unique, we can't predict it. However, my master has already performed a divination on our trip. Although there will be twists and turns, we will be able to get what we want in the end. Since the final result is smooth, then young master should be able to get out of the formation. That's why we can wait here with peace of mind." After a pause, Gu Xian said again, "If we enter the formation to look for young master, it will greatly increase the power of the formation. It will be more of a hindrance than a help." Bai Xiaowen nodded. Bai Xiaowen looked around the cave where Zhou Yishan, a cultivator of the Western Han Dynasty, former Han Dynasty, lived. On the stone shelf against the wall, there were stone labels engraved with names such as Dragon Slaying Scripture, Inner Language of the Three Emperors, 5 Elements Secret Talisman, and so on. It was obvious that this was a bookshelf where Zhou Yishan's collection of books and classics were placed. Unfortunately, the bookshelf was empty now. There was not even a single book on it. He didn't know if it was because the books had decayed or because Zhang Daoling had taken them away. Of course, there was also the possibility that Sui had taken away his private collection in advance. However, this possibility was very small. Judging from Gu Xian's usual behavior, he was still a gentleman. Bai Xiaowen felt that it was a pity, but he quickly thought it through. He already had the 3 heavenly tomes of the Taiping technique. As a newbie who had just entered the sect, there was no need for him to be greedy and seek more books. After all, he couldn't bite off more than he could chew. Besides, even if there were books of Taoism here, he couldn't cultivate them without the resonance of the psionic particles. He couldn't bring them out of the Three Kingdoms plane. Suicai stood in front of the black gold gate at the furthest end of the cave and waved at Guxian and Bai Xiaowen. The two quickly walked over and saw that there were 3 futons in front of the gate. On the gate, there were embossed patterns, which seemed to be a comic book. Guxian smiled and said, "Master, have you solved the secret of the embossed patterns on the gate?" Suicai nodded slightly. "I have some guesses, but I still need to verify them." Guxian said, "Is there really no other way to break open this gate by force?" Suicai shook his head. "The Genjin giant gate is unusually strong. Coupled with the mountain root formation carved on it, it has already become one with the mountain. Unless you have the ability to move mountains, there is no way to open it." Guxian nodded. "I was too rash. Master, please tell me how to proceed." Bai Xiaowen looked at the embossed patterns. At the top, there was an adult sitting on a cloud with an otherworldly aura. Below, there was another adult who was respectfully bowing to the clouds. There were a few small people beside him, who seemed to be attendants. Suicai said, "The embossed patterns on the gate tell the story of the Yellow Emperor's apprenticeship to Guangqingzi. There are 3 futons in front of the gate. 2 of the larger ones correspond to the Emperor's preceptor and Emperor, while the last one corresponds to the disciple. If you want to enter the sect, you need a pair of master and disciple, as well as a prosperous emperor, to sit on the corresponding futons." Bai Xiaowen and Guxian looked at each other. Guxian smiled. "Isn't this a coincidence? Young master unified the world and established the Great Yan dynasty. He was the founding emperor, and no one else in the world can compare to him. Master and I happen to be a pair of master and disciple." Suicai nodded, and a smile appeared on his face. "This means that we have encountered a true immortal fate. It's a pity that Zhou Yishan and Zhang Daoling, the 2 seniors of the Taoist sect, did not come at the right time, and returned empty-handed after crossing the treasure mountain." As he spoke, Suicai waved his sleeves, and a gust of wind blew, sweeping away the dead branches, withered leaves, and accumulated dust on the stone wall, revealing a piece of stone inscription. Suicai pointed at the inscription and said, "Take a look for yourselves." Bai Xiaowen and Guxian saw that the inscription on the stone wall was left by Zhou Yishan. The general idea was that he came to the abode of the pre-Qin immortal master Guangqingzi after visiting a famous mountain. Although he understood the mystery of the relief on the door, he could not bring a human emperor to help him open the door. It was a pity. The next paragraph was left by Zhang Daoling 50 to 60 years ago. The general idea was the same, and it expressed regret. However, Zhang Daoling further speculated that the key to opening the door was the fate of the emperor. If it was a conservative emperor or a muddle-headed emperor, he would not be able to compare with the ancient Yellow Emperor, and his fate would not be enough to open the door. Bai Xiaowen recalled. Zhou Yishan's dynasty was the era of Emperor Zhao and Emperor Xian of the Western Han. Zhang Daoling's era was the era of Emperor Huan of the Eastern Han. These emperors did not have much fate, and it would be useless to pull them over. Chapter 1391. Suicai, his disciple, and Bai Xiaowen sat cross-legged on 3 different praying mats. According to Suicai's instructions, the 3 of them drew out their elemental energy. The praying mats beneath them emitted a gentle glow. Then, 3 thin lines extended from the edges of the praying mats and pointed towards the black gold door. On the door, the relief patterns lit up one by one. The circular plate in the middle of the black gold door made clicking sounds. Then, it automatically rotated 2 times to the left and 8 times to the right. Then, the black gold door split in the middle, one on the left and one on the right, and entered the belly of the mountain. A glowing cave appeared in front of the 3 of them. A fragrance floated in the air, and they could faintly hear the melodious sound of a bell. Bai Xiaowen felt that it was strange. This cave had been sealed for a long time, but it did not have any oppressive aura. Instead, there was a fragrance and the sound of a bell. This was indeed a blessed land for immortals. Suicii stood up and said, "The door is open. I will enter first as a guide. The emperor will be in the middle, and Guxian will be at the back." Then, the three of them entered in a single file. After the last person, Guxian, entered, the black gold door slowly closed and disappeared into the fog. Bai Xiaowen was shocked. When he looked in from the outside, he could not see clearly. He thought that it was an ordinary cave residence, at most a little bigger. However, after entering, he realized that there was a completely different world behind the door. This was obviously a valley. When he looked up, he could see the blue sky and white clouds. There were strange peaks and cypresses on the side, and immortal energy lingered around. Clear springs flowed, birds sang, and flowers bloomed. Bai Xiaowen could not help but ask, "Immortals, why does this valley seem like another world?" Suicii said, "This is originally a place outside of this world. It is not surprising that immortals have the means to contain Mount Sumru in a mustard seed." Bai Xiaowen directly understood that it was an independent half-space similar to a treasured land. It existed based on the main world of the three kingdoms. He checked and found that he could still submit the Great Unification mission and return at any time. He was relieved. After pausing for a while, Suicii said, "This is an excellent place for training. The elemental energy of heaven and earth is rich. Cultivating in seclusion here for a year was equivalent to cultivating in the outside world for 10 years. For cultivators, it can be called a blessed land." Bai Xiaowen asked Guxian in a low voice. Only then did he understand the significance of a treasured land rich in primordial qi to a cultivator. Because the lifespan of a Taoist cultivator was ultimately limited, with such a treasured land that could increase the efficiency of cultivation by tenfold, the possibility of attaining Tao would naturally be greatly increased. In front of him was a flight of stone steps that extended all the way to the top of the mountain, hidden by the clouds. Halfway up the mountain, one could vaguely see a corner of a cornice. It seemed to be a building. "Let's go." Suicii was still leading the way, Bai Xiaowen was in the middle, and Guxian was at the back. Bai Xiaowen did not understand the logic behind such a way of walking. In short, he did not understand, but he felt that it was awesome. He just had to follow it. When they were halfway up the mountain, Bai Xiaowen saw that the corner of the cornice was actually a huge pavilion. The pavilion was 10 feet tall and was supported by 3 white jade-like pillars. An ancient bell hung from the top of the pavilion. As the breeze blew, the melodious sound of the bell could be heard. As they were closer, Bai Xiaowen could feel the extraordinariness of the bell. Standing in the pavilion and listening to the sound of the bell, he vaguely felt relaxed and happy. "Immortals, what bell is this?" Perhaps it was because of the luck of the founding emperor, Bai Xiaowen, Suicii, who had been cold and quiet along the way, answered Bai Xiaowen's questions without hesitation. He said, "This bell is called the Luopa bell. It is the protective treasure of immortal master Guangqingzi. The sound of the bell is used to subdue evil spirits and can shake one's soul." Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes and smiled. "Is it really that magical? I wonder if it is effective on people." Suicii nodded. "It is effective. However, without the activation of the immortal master's mana, the power of the Luopa bell alone is less than 10% effective on ordinary people." Bai Xiaowen smiled. "Let me try." Suicii was startled and wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Bai Xiaowen summoned the evil lady and floated up to shake the Luopa bell. Clang! 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 The sound of the bell suddenly became violent. After the first loud sound, the evil lady's body turned into a cloud of black smoke and dissipated, announcing her death. Bai Xiaowen felt that his ears were ringing and his soul was leaving his body. It was as if the sound of the bell was a big hand that grabbed his soul and dragged it out. In just 3 rings, he received 300 points of true damage. Each ring was exactly 100 points. When the evil lady died, she received exactly 1,000 points of true damage. It seemed that what Suicii said was true. Without anyone activating the Luopa bell, its power alone was less than 10% effective on ordinary people. When the bell rang, Swazi's expression was normal, but Guxian's face was slightly pale. Fortunately, after the third ring, everything returned to normal. Guxian scolded, "Why did you summon ghosts to ring the Luopa bell?" Fortunately, the Luopa bell's effect on ordinary people is weak. If you see other ancient artifacts later, you must not use them. Guxian took the initiative to reprimand Bai Xiaowen to prevent Swazi from getting angry. Swazi waved his hand to stop Guxian and said, "You are the founding emperor, not an ordinary young man. Every move of yours must have a deep meaning. If you have other ideas, can you tell us? Otherwise, if the three of us are not on the same page, it will be difficult to unlock the jade slip." Bai Xiaowen was a little ashamed. Swazi and Guxian were magnanimous, which made him seem petty. Bai Xiaowen bowed. "Immortal Zhua, I once obtained a strange item that can summon ghosts. It can be said that I have benefited a lot. However, there is a hidden danger within this strange object. With my current ability, it is very difficult to resolve." Swazi nodded and said, "You want me and my disciple to help you solve this hidden danger?" Bai Xiaowen smiled. "That was indeed my idea. But now, with the Luopa bell left by Master Immortal Guangqingzi, I am more confident. Just now, I tested the power of the Luopa bell out of selfishness. Please don't blame me." Swazi nodded slightly. "Can you take out that strange item for me to take a look, young master?" Bai Xiaowen set the black soul stone to the display mode. Swazi squinted and said, "This item has been refined by young master, and your mind is locked. I can't pry into the mystery of it." Bai Xiaowen smiled. "I have already thought of a countermeasure for this hidden danger. I only need Immortal Zhua and Taoist's help." Swazi and Guxian nodded in agreement. Bai Xiaowen said, "Delifa." The image of Delifa, the soul catcher banshee, appeared on the surface of the black soul stone. There was a worried look between her brows. "Master, have you really decided?" Bai Xiaowen nodded. "Indecisiveness will only lead to trouble." It should be noted that Swazi and Guxian could not hear what Delifa said. It should be that the rules of the spiritual realm had blocked it, so as not to say any confidential information that should not be known to the natives. After hearing this, Delifa made up her mind. "Okay, Master, please unlock the 8th layer of the Black Soul Stone." Chapter 1392. Bai Xiaowen chose to unlock the 8th level. The spiritual world's laws prompted, growth type special equipment, Black Soul Stone has been upgraded. Equipment additional skill, Return of the Dead has been strengthened. Please choose the strengthening option. With a whoosh, the strengthening map of the 8th level of the Black Soul Stone was displayed. Strengthening option 1, add a new summon creature of the corpse demon race, Plague Beast. The Plague Beast has the Strengthen Leader template. 5,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 2, add a new summon creature of the soul race, Queen of Banshees. Queen of Banshees has the Strengthen Leader template. 5,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 3, add a new summon creature of the bone race, Frost Dragon. Frost Dragon has the Strengthen Leader template. 5,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 4, increase all attributes of your Death Knight by 10, and obtain the special skill, Gangrene. 4,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 5, increase all attributes of your Vampire Lord by 10, and obtain the special skill, Night Embrace. 4,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 6, increase all attributes of your Lich by 10, and obtain the special skill, Bone Piercing Cold. 4,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 7, increase the number of your Terror Knights by 4, and all attributes by 8. 4,000 soul essence is required. Strengthening option 8, increase the number of your soul-sucking banshees by 2, and all attributes by 10. 4,000 soul essence is required. There were a total of 8 strengthening options. They all looked very tempting. The first three options were to add a new rare leader-level summon creature. Whether it was the Queen of Banshees, the Plague Beast, or the Frost Dragon, they all sounded very powerful. They were even more powerful than the Death Knight. The three options in the middle, 4, 5, and 6, were to turn the previously lit leader into a rare leader and add a special skill. The last two options could further strengthen the advantage of numbers. Bai Xiaowen looked up at the Luopa bell. Light up strengthening option 2. Bai Xiaowen made his choice. The Queen of Banshees option lit up. A cloud of black fog spread out from the black soul stone and gradually condensed into a female ghost with revealing clothes and blood-red eyes. She floated in the air. Obviously, this female ghost was the Queen of Banshees. It was almost the same as Delifa's untransformed initial form. However, it was much taller and had a much stronger aura. After all, it was the difference between a rare elite and a rare leader. However, just as the Queen of Banshees was about to open her eyes, the black soul stone underwent a sudden change. A huge ball of black fog turned into a black skeleton figure holding a scythe and flew into the body of the Queen of Banshees, who had yet to open her eyes. In the next second, mist rose from the Queen of Banshees' body, and her aura rose rapidly. Notification from the spiritual realm's laws: due to unknown reasons, you have temporarily lost control of the Queen of Banshees. Then, the Queen of Banshees opened her eyes. At this moment, its aura had already soared to the point where Bai Xiaowen could only see a bunch of question marks. Bai Xiaowen only saw a few words after the name of the Queen of Banshees. Queen of Banshees, God's descendant creature level 8, a slightly old and strange voice sounded. Finally, I've waited for this day. It was a man's voice. When it came from the mouth of the Queen of Banshees, it made one's hair stand on end. The language was strange. It sounded like ancient Latin, but it was also not. Bai Xiaowen was already very familiar with ancient Latin and could barely understand it. However, Sui Xiai and Gu Xian just stared at each other. They had no idea what the Queen of Banshees was saying. This was normal. The transformations and language adjustments of the spiritual realm's rules were only for the awakened. It would not take into account the non-awakened. Along with the old and sentimental words, the Queen of Banshees opened her eyes and scanned the entire place. Bai Xiaowen's heart trembled slightly. He was now a pseudo-lord, but he was facing a god's descendant creature of the same level as him. There was a gap of 2 or 3 levels between them, so he still felt a lot of pressure. Hey! Where did this evil demon come from? Gu Xian shouted. Yellow light bloomed on the surface of his body and lingered around him. It was obvious that he was facing a great enemy. In comparison, Sui Xiai still had the demeanor of an immortal and appeared very calm. He waved his hand to stop Gu Xian. Don't rush. This evil demon and the Emperor seem to have something to say. It won't be too late to attack after they finish. Bai Xiaowen said with admiration, Immortals was really fearless in the face of danger. He has the demeanor of a master. Sui Xiai said indifferently, even if I can't defeat him, I can still run away. Bai Xiaowen was speechless. The Queen of Banshees, for now, obviously did not care about Sui Xiai and his disciple. Instead, she said, Where is Sid Delifa? On the surface of the black soul stone, the image of Delifa appeared. The Queen of Banshees nodded and praised, You did well, Sid Delifa. You chose a suitable servant and accumulated enough soul essence to allow my soul to recover. I will reward you. After pausing for a moment, the Queen of Banshees pointed at Bai Xiaowen and said, Necromancer, your ability is very outstanding. Now, you have 2 choices. First, submit to me and give me your soul imprint. I can keep your consciousness. Second, I will devour your soul and turn you into a tool without intelligence. Bai Xiaowen tilted his head. Do you want to introduce yourself first? Who are you? The Queen of Banshees was dumbfounded. Bai Xiaowen suddenly understood. Oh right, you don't understand the language I'm speaking now. Delifa? Come out and translate. Delifa did not dare to show his head. He only showed an image on the surface of the black soul stone and said to the Queen of Banshees, Master asked who you are. The Queen of Banshees was furious. You are still calling him Master? Why aren't you changing the way you address him? Are you too immersed in your role? Delpha said matter-of-factly, of course he is my master. You traitor! Why did you betray me? How dare you betray me? The Queen of Banshees was enraged by too. Delpha said, this choice is actually not difficult to make. You are the Grim Reaper and possess great power. However, you died in such a cowardly manner, leaving only a wisp of your soul behind. You are relying on the Soul Stone to struggle at death's door. It can be seen that your brain is not working well. My master, on the other hand, has always defeated opponents who were much stronger than him with his weak strength. His intelligence is 10 times greater than yours. Now, my master is about to advance further and complete the sublimation of his life stage. He is like a young dragon that is about to enter his youth and has a boundless future. At this time, how can I choose you, a candle that is about to be extinguished? The Queen of Banshees, who was also the incarnation of the Grim Reaper, said sternly, you are wrong. You will soon know how foolish you are. My plan has succeeded. Next, you, the laughable new master, will also become my puppet. Delpha Sig, you will kneel down and beg me. As for me, I will disdain you. Chapter 1393. This. Excuse me, are you done with your lines? Bai Xiaowen dug his ears. I said, can we do it now? Don't just talk, you bastard. The Death God's incarnation was fuming with anger. He pointed at Bai Xiaowen. You ant, maggot, lowly wild dog. I will tear you into pieces. I will torture your soul for eternity. Bai Xiaowen shrugged. He finally understood why Delpha wasn't willing to follow this god of death. This brain was clearly one-track minded. Just a little teasing would make it want to die. No matter how powerful one was, without a brain, one would still be tricked by the enemy. Unless one had the power to absolutely surpass everything. Obviously, this death god did not have such power. Otherwise, he would not have been tricked and fallen into such dire straits. Of course, perhaps this death god's brain was very useful when he was at his peak, but now that he had just recovered his soul, he might not have fully recovered, so his actions were a little retarded. The death god's incarnation raised his hand to the sky and said loudly, now, witness my power. Everything you have is just a tribute to me. Bai Xiaowen's black soul crystal kept vibrating. Notifications from the spiritual realm's laws came one after another. Due to unknown reasons, you have temporarily lost control of the ghoul archers, X10. Due to unknown reasons, you have temporarily lost control of the skeleton warriors. Due to unknown reasons, you have temporarily lost control of the Death Knights. Due to unknown reasons, Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and looked at the Death God's incarnation. The army of the dead that originally belonged to him had been forcefully summoned by the Death God, or rather, collectively turned over. Ghoul archers, skeleton warriors, Death Knights, Terror Knights, Ghoul Demon Arcane Masters, fiendish shadow assassins. They were densely packed. Bai Xiaowen seemed to feel how pitiful, weak, and helpless his opponents in the league were. Fortunately, there were still a few creatures that had not been pulled over. For example, Butcher, Keats, and Delpha. Why didn't you pull all of them over? Bai Xiaowen asked in confusion. Delpha did not dare to use the Black Soul Stone. Only an image appeared on the surface. Master, Butcher, Kits and I have the ability to move independently, so we can resist the call of the Grim Reaper. Bai Xiaowen nodded. It seemed that Dr. Zombie was also in the same situation. However, the zombie doctor's combat power was even weaker than a goose's, so it was negligible. The Grim Reaper sneered, foolish human, your power comes from me. Of course, I can take it back at any time. As for Sig Delpha, as well as that weak-stitched monster and vampire, these traitors, after I destroy you, I will cleanse their souls and let them know who is the master. After pausing for a moment, the Grim Reaper said, my will is hidden in the Black Soul Stone and occasionally awakens. I have also seen your battles and recorded some of your information. As a summoner, your main body's combat ability isn't bad. Unfortunately, most of your strength comes from your summoned creatures. Without them, you are nothing. Bai Xiaowen clenched his fists. It seems that your understanding of me is not very good. Delifa translated this sentence. The Grim Reaper sneered and shook his head. No, my arrangements are far more than you can imagine. There is also a servant that you will never expect who is about to cross over to. The Grim Reaper suddenly raised his hand and roared at the sky, appear. My most loyal and most powerful servant, the Black Knight Overlord. In the sky, the white clouds were dyed with a layer of gray. Then, with a loud rumble, they turned into a green-black vortex. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. To be honest, he was a little surprised. If the Black Knight Overlord, Gloria, was really summoned, then he could only trap Gloria as well. Unfortunately, Gloria was not a summoned creature of the Black Soul Stone and could not be resurrected. If she died, then the C-grade gold item, Call of the North, would be wasted. However, the green-black vortex in the sky only spun for a few seconds before dissipating into nothingness. Ding dong! A question mark appeared above everyone's head. The Grim Reaper was stunned. Then, he raised his hand again. This time, the summoning was much more formal. Black Knight Overlord, Gloria. In the name of the seventh Grim Reaper, Nigar, I summon you to this world. The green-black vortex in the sky formed again, spun, and finally, dissipated. Ding dong! A second question mark appeared above everyone's head. Guxian said strangely, Master, what is this foreign demon doing? Zhuo Ci was experienced and knowledgeable. He looked up at the sky and said, he should be trying to break the protective array of Master Immortal Guangqingzi's cave abode. As for what exactly he wants to do, I don't know. However, what he is doing is futile. This cave abode's array formation uses the ancient artifact, the Luo Pabel, as the array core. Without destroying the Luo Pabel, it cannot be broken. Bai Xiaowen laughed. Then, he saw the Grim Reaper's blood-red eyes looking over and giving Bai Xiaowen a death stare. Bai Xiaowen took a step back and waved his hand with a smile. Sorry, I have been professionally trained. I will never laugh, unless I can't help it. Ha ha ha. Delifa also laughed and didn't translate this sentence. However, the Grim Reaper could also see that Bai Xiaowen was laughing at him. He said angrily, enough. Without the Black Knight Overlord, I can still achieve my goal. Attack! The Death Knight led the 3 Terror Knights and launched a legion charge. Behind him, the undead archers drew their bows and arrows, and the undead demon arcane masters gathered lightning. A circle of black ripples spread out from the Grim Reaper's body. The spiritual realm's law prompted the message, Nigar the Grim Reaper's divine descendant skill, Grim Reaper's domain. Within the range of the Grim Reaper's domain, all friendly undead creatures will have their attributes increased by 35%. Their attacks will be randomly inflicted with one of the 9 disease effects, such as necrosis, cholera, and bad blood. The Grim Reaper's domain will also suppress all enemy undead creatures. Just this bonus skill alone showed how powerful Nigar the Grim Reaper was. Even an incarnation had such a powerful halo skill. Under normal circumstances, this would be a hopeless situation. As a summoner, in a situation where almost all of his summoned creatures were deprived of their ability to join the enemy, he would have no power to resist the incarnation of the Grim Reaper. Bai Xiaowen would never let himself be in a hopeless situation. Not to mention the mysterious Zhuo Ci and the even more mysterious and powerful Luo Pabel, even without them, he could still submit the Grand Unification mission and escape. Of course, if he escaped like this, the Black Soul Stone, which was his exclusive equipment, would probably be useless. In the end, only the Butcher, Kits, and a few other summoned creatures with the ability to move on their own would be left. Of course, Bai Xiaowen couldn't accept this. Then how could he face the Grim Reaper? Left Immortal Elder, protect the Grim Reaper, protect the Grim Reaper. Bai Xiaowen turned half a circle and went behind Zhuo Ci. Chapter 1394. Bai Xiaowen chose to go with the flow. In the Black Tide realm, a level 6 demigod lord was enough to suffocate the Continental Alliance army. Although the demigod lord's spirit descent was a bonus, the strength of the demigod lord was still terrifying. There was no jump mission at the moment, so Bai Xiaowen did not want to be the first to rush in. He was not the protagonist of a hot-blooded youth manga. The safest way was to let Sui test the strength of this level 8 demigod lord. Facing the charging undead army, Sui waved his sleeves. A muddy terrain suddenly appeared in front of them, and the 4 death knights who were charging at the front sank into the mud in the blink of an eye. Even their horses and men were submerged in the mud. Even though the army was immune to crowd control, sinking into the mud meant hitting a wall. Naturally, they were forced to stop. Moreover, the mud seemed to have a strong adhesive force. Neither the Death Knights nor the Terror Knights could rush out. Guxian clasped his hands together. A hazy circle of light spread out and surrounded Sui, Bai Xiaowen, and himself. The arrows of the ghoul archers and the ghoul demon arcane master's lightning strike struck the hazy circle of light, but only created ripples. Guxian maintained his clasped hands. Bai Xiaowen could feel streams of elemental energy gushing out of his body and entering the hazy circle of light. Obviously, the hazy circle of light was a shield. Guxian's elemental energy was equivalent to Qiao Rui's internal energy. It could be continuously used to replenish the shield and defend against external attacks. Sui waved his hands and threw out 2 talismans. They turned into 2 yellow lights and landed on the ground. The talismans landed on the muddy terrain and seemed to absorb the mud continuously. They grew with the wind, 1 foot, 5 feet, 9 feet. Soon, they turned into 2 yellow mud giants that were 3 feet tall. The yellow clay giant took a big step forward and welcomed the skeleton warriors and other melee summon creatures. Its huge palm slapped the ground, causing the earth to shake and the mud to spread. The skeleton warriors and other summon creatures were all slowed down, making it difficult for them to move. In the blink of an eye, Sui and Guxian had taken control of almost all the summon creatures. Sui said indifferently, relying on external forces is not the right way after all. Foreign fiend, if you have any other tricks up your sleeve, feel free to use them. Not only was Nigar, the incarnation of death, shocked, even Bai Xiaowen was shocked. He knew that Sui was powerful, but he did not expect them to be this powerful. Furthermore, when Sui had used his Dao technique, Bai Xiaowen's Eye of Evolution had not given him any information about the Dao technique. Clearly, when facing Zhang Jiao's Dao techniques, there would be a notification. Why did it break down here? Bai Xiaowen secretly complained. This golden finger, oh no, golden thigh, had never played its role. Its presence was always very weak. Bai Xiaowen always felt that it was not a coincidence that the Eye of Evolution had collided with him in 2021. Perhaps it was the arrangement of some unimaginable big shot. But there should at least be a manual. Bai Xiaowen threw away this idea. The Eye of Evolution made his brain work super fast and had a superhuman IQ. This level of benefit was already very good, not to mention that there was also immunity to mental temptation and self-protection. He could not ask for too much. Nigar, the god of death, faced Sui, gritted his teeth and said, "Who the hell are you?" Sui still looked indifferent and said, "What is he talking about?" Bai Xiaowen originally wanted to add fuel to the fire and translate it as "he's scolding you" or something like that, but he felt that it was not very appropriate, so he obediently repeated it. Sui nodded slightly. "Tell him that I am Tianzhu Mountain's Qi refiner, Sui Yuanfang, Taoist named Wujiao. It's fine if foreign demons run amok in the barbarian land, but if they dare to behave atrociously in the land of Huaxia, the ancestral core of Taoism, I will definitely not tolerate them." Bai Xiaowen asked Delifa to translate. Of course, Qi refiner was not easy to translate, so Delifa translated it as Great Master. Nigar, the god of death, said sternly, "I don't care where you are from. Do you think you can defeat me with 1 or 2 tricks? You're dreaming. My power is beyond your imagination." Nigar raised his head and let out a shrill howl. Bai Xiaowen received a notification. The Banshee's Howl of the God of Death has been activated. For unknown reasons, the Banshee's Howl has been strengthened. All enemies will undergo multiple tests of will. If they fail once, they will enter a state of fear. If they fail twice, they will enter a state of dizziness. If they fail 3 times, they will die immediately. The closer they are to the God of Death, the more tests they will have to pass. This skill was similar to Sun Tzu's Lord Tier skill, Overlord, but it focused on control. Bai Xiaowen hurriedly activated the active skill of the wristband of misfortune, Sealed Fate. Sui Ci also had a serious expression. He reached out with both hands and pressed them on Bai Xiaowen's and Gu Xian's shoulders. A thick wave of elemental energy flowed out and turned into a layer of light, greatly reducing the power of the Banshee's Howl. Even so, Gu Xian still failed once and entered a state of fear. His attack speed and movement speed were halved. Bai Xiaowen had the sealed fate of the wristband of misfortune, so he was immune to the Banshee's Howl. Sui Ci was a little surprised. He glanced at Bai Xiaowen and praised, as expected of the Emperor, "You have a treasure to protect your soul." Bai Xiaowen quickly changed the topic, "Left Immortal Wang, be careful. The demon is attacking again." Chapter 1395. Bai Xiaowen was a little hesitant. "Although this Luo Pabel doesn't deal much damage, I'm afraid I can't take it." Sui Ci frowned and said, "Don't you know how to use elemental energy to protect your body?" Gu Xian said, "Yes, Master." Young Master doesn't have a master. He just happened to learn some techniques from cultivators. Sui Ci nodded and said, "If that's the case, I'll help you." Sui Ci stretched out his hand and clapped. A beam of elemental energy shot out and enveloped Bai Xiaowen's body. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, "You are protected by the elemental energy shield. You can absorb 75 points of damage from a single attack for 20 seconds. If you take more than 200 points of damage in a single attack, the elemental energy shield will be broken and disappear." Bai Xiaowen praised in his heart. Sui Ci's casual slap was equivalent to giving Bai Xiaowen a special skill similar to Qiao Rui's internal energy for 20 seconds. It could absorb 1,500 points of damage. Of course, the amount of damage absorbed was limited. Bai Xiaowen still had to take 25 points of damage by himself, but it wasn't a big problem. Bai Xiaowen activated the glide skill and jumped 30 feet high, leaving the black fog's range. He used his hands and feet like an ape and climbed along the pillar to the top of the pavilion. He stood beside the Luopa bell and struck it with his fists. Clang! 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 The bell rang. Every time it rang, the elemental energy shield around Bai Xiaowen's body trembled greatly. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, "Due to unknown reasons, you received 100 points of true damage." The elemental energy shield absorbed 75 points of true damage. You received 25 points of true damage. The notifications continued to ring. However, Bai Xiaowen only received 25 points of damage per attack. Death God Nagori was different. As an undead, a summoned creature of the soul race, it would receive 1,000 points of true damage every time the bell rang. Because the Queen of Banshees was a soul, it was the most restrained by the Luopa bell. When the bell rang for the first time, the black fog shook violently and quickly gathered, transforming back into the Queen of Banshees' image. It was the temporary incarnation of Death God Nagori. What's going on? This bell. After the bell rang for the third time, Death God Nagori's expression changed. Its originally stalwart body became much weaker. Bai Xiaowen waved his fists and continued to strike the bell. Death God of Death screamed, "Stop!" Then it raised its sharp claws, and a black skeletal energy shot towards Bai Xiaowen. Spiritual Realm Rule Notification, Death God Nigar's skill, Soul Siphon has been activated. Sui Ci pulled out the hairpin on her head and threw it out. It turned into a white crane in the air and accurately blocked the path of the Soul Siphon. The white crane's body quickly turned black, and after a mournful cry, it disappeared into thin air. Swazi's hairpin was also broken into 2 pieces. Bai Xiaowen had already rung the bell for the second time, 3 times in a row. It's it to S. Bai Xiaowen could see Death God Nigar's HP bar as he was in combat mode. 3957/10,000. It had 10,000 HP. Bai Xiaowen finally understood why Swazi said that the Death God's avatar had a strong foundation and he couldn't defeat it. With 10,000 HP, plus all kinds of powerful damage reduction abilities, who could defeat it? From Bai Xiaowen's point of view, Swazi, as a Huaxiachi practitioner, had the advantage of being flexible in combat. But in terms of attributes and skill strength, Swazi was definitely not as good as the Death God's avatar. After all, no matter how powerful Swazi was, she was only a figure from the awakened plane. Although she was a semi-transcendent expert, there was still a gap in strength. Bai Xiaowen continued to strike the bell. It rang 3 times in a row. The god of death, Nigar, suddenly tore open his own chest, and the black fog on the surface of his body rolled over and over, turning into a black hard shell-like armor that protected him. Bai Xiaowen could see that Nagori's HP had become 960/10,000. The other 3,000 HP had been forcibly converted into something like a shield. As the bell rang, the black armor shattered and fell off. However, Death God Nagori's body was not affected by the black armor. He flew up, turned into a skeleton of black gas, and rushed toward Bai Xiaowen. This was Nagori's last fight. He had seen the horror of the Luopa bell, but he also saw the truth of Bai Xiaowen's strength. The bell only rang 3 times at a time, and after each time, there was a short interval. The interval after the 3rd ring was Nagori's last chance. Nagori flew at an extremely fast speed. He circled around Bai Xiaowen, turned into a black gas whip, and suddenly lashed out. Bai Xiaowen did not have time to strike the bell for the 4th time. He fell with a thud. The elemental shield that Swazi gave him was also broken by the whip. Nagori floated around the Luopa bell and looked down vigilantly. He would not allow anyone to strike this terrifying bell again. However, Bai Xiaowen revealed a trace of a smile. As he fell, a slightly broken small pagoda appeared in Bai Xiaowen's palm. C-grade gold item, pagoda, damaged. After using it, it could cause 3 energy shocks to enemies in the area. Each shock would cause 200 true damage. Moreover, after the 3 energy shocks ended, it would also apply the repentance effect to the enemy. The small pagoda expanded with the wind and crashed down on Nagori's head. 3 golden lights fell on Nagori's body. Nagori roared again and again. However, he was affected by the repentance effect and was frozen in place. The repentance that was supposed to last 7 seconds only lasted for less than 2 seconds. However, Bai Xiaowen was prepared. He took a deep breath. Blood Rage activated, Oversized Serpent Strike. This Oversized Serpent Strike, just the Blood Rage alone, added 900 points of damage after striking the bell 3 times and ringing the bell 9 times. Not to mention, there was also the increase in strength from the pain potential. As a soul creature, the Queen of Banshees, it would take an additional 50% of magic damage. A huge wave of flames engulfed Nagori's remnant body. Bai Xiaowen's body happened to fall into Guxian's open arms. Bai Xiaowen coughed and quickly slipped down from Guxian's princess hug. The air suddenly became anxious. It should be the residual heat of the oversized serpent strike that had not dissipated, right? With a thud, Nagori's remains fell to the ground. When the wind blew, they scattered in all directions like burning paper money. Only a wrinkled leather item was left on the spot. Bai Xiaowen reached out to take it and unfolded it. It was actually a leather mask. It was as thin as a cicada's wing, but it was very tough. What is this? Bai Xiaowen checked the item description. Mysterious mask, unknown item. Please check it after advancing to an evolved being. Alright, it seems like I'm ahead of myself again, Bai Xiaowen muttered in his heart. No matter what, the hidden danger in the Black Soul Stone had been removed. Bai Xiaowen also received many notifications. They were all notifications that the Black Soul Stone had changed. However, he did not look at them for the time being. Instead, he bowed to Zhuo Xi and Guxian. "Thank you for your help, immortals." Chapter 1396. Guxian asked, "Young master, what's your relationship with this foreign demon? How did you provoke such a powerful demon? If it wasn't for Master Guangqingzi's Luopa bell, I'm afraid it would have been difficult to resist today." Guxian's meaning was very simple. Generally, to provoke such a powerful demon, one must have some relationship with the other party. Zhuo Xi said, "There's no need to ask." Guxian came to his senses and quickly said, "You're right, master." Bai Xiaowen didn't say much. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome to explain the ins and outs of the Black Soul Stone. After all, he had told Guxian that he had encountered a Taoist relic and embarked on the path of Taoist cultivation. The Black Soul Stone was obviously not something from Huaxia's Taoist sections. Zhuo Xi and Guxian didn't probe into Bai Xiaowen's background because it was a custom of Huaxia's Taoist cultivators. Zhuo Xi said, "Since the Emperor's matter has been settled, let's quickly go up the mountain. The method to decipher the jade slip must be at the top of the mountain." Bai Xiaowen pointed at the Luopa bell. "Immortal Zhuo, can you take this treasure?" Bai Xiaowen actually wanted to get it himself. This thing looked like a big killing weapon, and it was a group attack. Unfortunately, the compulsory enlistment edict had been used on the 3 heavenly books, and he didn't have a second one. Zhuo Xi shook his head and said, "You can't take it. Unless you have magic power that surpasses Master Guangqingzi's." Bai Xiaowen was shocked. It seemed that even with the compulsory enlistment edict, he couldn't do anything to the Luopa bell. According to Zhuo Xi, this Luopa bell still had an owner. If he wanted to take it by force, it would be equivalent to snatching the treasure from Master Guangqingzi. Bai Xiaowen could only give up this tempting idea and continue to climb the mountain with Zhuo Xi and Guxian. On the way up the mountain, Bai Xiaowen checked the information of the changes in the Black Soul Stone. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, "Due to unknown reasons, you have obtained all the rights to grow special equipment, Black Soul Stone. You can give the summoned creatures in the Black Soul Stone their own consciousness so that they can use some psionic equipment. B. The skills of the summoned creatures in the Black Soul Stone no longer have a cooldown time, but it will cause physical burden and mental exhaustion. C. You can choose whether or not to deprive the soul and soul essence of the soul choose soul. D. You have unlocked the option in the Black Soul Stone. The amount of soul essence consumed will be half the above 4 were newly unlocked rights. A and B, these 2 was solid. In the Qian S. Master Zeus S Master. T. Thus however, he could only use part of the spiritual equipment instead of the full set, which was still a bit of a flaw. TSSSS. To T chi to have a B to have no cooldown time. Only the mental in excess. This the chi to have no skills to down time tit. Bai Xiaowen had always thought that this was the biggest improvement of the awakening skill. It could greatly shorten the casting interval of the skills. From these 2 points, it could be seen that the summoned creatures of the Black Soul Stone had moved from digitized to real, which meant that they had greater potential. Master Zeus TS Master Zeus TS Master Zeus TS Master Zeus TS Master Zeus T was actually the rights that Delifa had used in the past, but Bai Xiaowen could not use it. Now, Bai Xiaowen also had this right. To be honest, it was because Bai Xiaowen did not have this right that he had been wary of the Black Soul Stone. As the owner of the equipment, Bai Xiaowen had to rely on Delifa to use the functions of the Black Soul Stone. He could not use it himself. This was obviously illogical. The Black Soul Stone was too powerful as an exclusive equipment. According to the theory of balance, it was inevitable that there would be side effects. However, this was just an unfounded speculation. Bai Xiaowen's lack of full rights to the Black Soul Stone was the important basis for his suspicion. Bai Xiaowen had been thinking of ways to instigate Delifa to defect. If the Black Soul Stone contained unstable factors, the representative Banshee in the Black Soul Stone must know some inside information. Of course, instigating Delifa to defect did not require intimidation. Bai Xiaowen made two preparations. First, he tried his best to show his ability and establish an undefeatable image in Delifa's mind. Secondly, at the right time, he had to beat Delifa and make her surrender. Both of these preparations were effective. During the second exploration of the Aran Plain, when Delifa resurrected Gloria and became the Lord of the Black Knights, Bai Xiaowen tested it once. Later, in the Black Tide Plain, Bai Xiaowen successfully defeated the Great Lord of the Descendants of Gods, which really shocked Delifa. At the same time, she realized that her original master, the remnant soul of the 7th generation death god Nagori, was not invincible. With this psychological loosening, it was much easier for Bai Xiaowen to persuade Delifa. He obtained a series of key information from Delifa. The Black Soul Stone had a total of 8 levels. The remnant soul of death god Nagori was hiding in the 8th level. Each level required soul essence to light up. In fact, half of it was used to nourish Nagori's remnant soul for him to devour. When Bai Xiaowen unlocked the 8th level and lit up one of the options, Nagori would show his ferocious face, flip the table, and completely turn Bai Xiaowen into a puppet. From the perspective of death god Nagori, this plan was indeed very safe. Using the Black Soul Stone to cultivate an undead summoner, referred to as the Chosen One, using the efforts of the other party to constantly embezzle soul essence to nourish himself and accumulate strength. He also did not have to worry about the Chosen One being too strong and out of his control, because he had the highest authority to control the summoned creatures of the Black Soul Stone. When the time came, he could directly deprive the other party of the control authority and turn the Chosen One into a commander without an army. In fact, even if there was a deviation in this step of the plan, such as Bai Xiaowen's transformation of the Wrathclaw, Keats, and Dr. Zombie, making them break away from Nagori's highest authority. The Chosen One had many summoned creatures that could fight Nagori, and Nagori was not afraid. Just the Death God's domain alone could cause a level suppression on the summoned creatures of the undead, which was enough to cripple most of these summoned creatures. Then, Nagori and the Chosen One would fight one-on-one, and it would be clear who would win and who would lose. After Bai Xiaowen came to the Three Kingdoms Plain, he had been delaying the time to light up the 8th level. The Three Kingdoms Plain was a very difficult plain, so there must be a legendary master who could fight against Nagori. Bai Xiaowen walked the Taoist mission line and did not want to give up on Guxian, because he wanted to find a Taoist master. Originally, the Nanhua Old Deity was an excellent choice. Bai Xiaowen used the forceful enlistment edict to obtain the heavenly book of the Nanhua Old Deity. He wanted to lure the Old Deity to appear, and then find a way to negotiate. Not only could he solve the mystery of the Jade Scroll, but he also hoped to solve the hidden danger of the Black Soul Stone, Nagori. Unfortunately, the Nanhua Old Deity did not appear. Fortunately, there was always a way out. The Zhuxiai appeared, and naturally became the only target that Bai Xiaowen could use. Chapter 1397. In addition to the changes in the Black Soul Stone, Bai Xiaowen also received some other notifications. You've killed a god's descendant, Nigar, the incarnation of death, and you're the only source of damage. You've gained a hidden ability, Godslayer. Godslayer, passive. You ignore the rank suppression of God's descendant. Your attacks will always cause damage to the God's descendant that targets its weak points. When you hit the same vital point of the God's descendant multiple times, you can activate the Godslayer ability to temporarily reduce your maximum HP by 99% and engage in a will battle. If you win, the target God's descendant will die directly. If you lose, you won't be able to activate the Godslayer ability again for 30 days. Note 1. The more times you hit the same vital point of the target God's descendant, the higher the bonus you'll get when you engage in a will battle. But you'll need at least 2 hits to activate the Godslayer ability. Note 2. The temporary reduction in the maximum HP will recover in 1 to 30 days. The recovery speed depends on the strength of the target God's descendant. That is, the the greater the difference in strength, the slower the recovery speed. This God Slayer ability seemed very powerful, but 99% of the time, it couldn't be used. So far, Bai Xiaowen had only encountered 2 God's descendant creatures. Among them, the Great Lord was a criminal that was targeted by the spiritual realm, so the probability of him appearing was very low. As for Nigar, he was a boss raised by Bai Xiaowen's Black Soul Stone. Therefore, in the normal plane of the Awakened Ones, God's descendant creatures basically wouldn't appear. Even king-level creatures hadn't appeared before. However, it was always a good thing to have this hidden ability. When Bai Xiaowen became an evolver, it might be useful in a higher plane. But using the Godslayer ability was quite risky. It was equivalent to cutting off all means of retreat. From the description of the skill, whether the activation succeeded or failed, 99% of the user's maximum HP was the prerequisite. There were also some other notifications. For example, the death of Nigar, the incarnation of death, provided Bai Xiaowen with 800 points of soul essence. Compared to the amount of soul essence that Nigar had embezzled, it was obviously far from enough. But it was good enough. Anyway, the Black Soul Stone only had 8 layers. Its growth had reached its limit. The last notification was about the equipment itself. The exclusive binding status of the Black Soul Stone disappeared. This was what surprised Bai Xiaowen the most. What did it mean? Just like Li Shi's Red Leaf Suzerain's glorious longsword and Old Han's waist anchor chain, the Black Soul Stone had become an unbound item. They were like family heirlooms. This was too much. This was a Black Soul Stone with full growth points. If he were to give a level 1 SMUF account, wouldn't that mean that the other party would go straight to the heavens? Bai Xiaowen was a little puzzled. He quickly inquired, I can transfer my exclusive equipment, Black Soul Stone? The spiritual realm's laws prompted, yes. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. After the transfer, can I still control the summon creatures inside? The spirit realm's law replied, you currently have the highest authority over the Black Soul Stone. As long as you are within a suitable distance, you can summon and control the summoned creatures in the Black Soul Stone. Bai Xiaowen asked the most important question, after the transfer, will the growth and soul essence of the Black Soul Stone not change? Only then did the Spirit Realm's law answer, no. After the transfer, the Black Soul Stone will be bound to a new awakened and become a new exclusive equipment. At that time, the growth and soul essence will be reset to 0. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. He understood. After eliminating Neger, Bai Xiaowen became the true owner of the Black Soul Stone. Moreover, the Black Soul Stone had gradually become real from a data equipment. Bai Xiaowen could transfer the Black Soul Stone and bind it to a new owner. From a logical point of view, it made sense. As for the growth and soul essence after the transfer, it was probably a balance made by the Spirit Realm's laws. Of course, Bai Xiaowen would not transfer the Black Soul Stone. He was just asking for clarification. Young master, we're here. Gu Xian's voice sounded behind him. Bai Xiaowen looked up. In front of him was a bronze palace. There was no plaque, but there was a poem above the main door, Fate has brought me to understand the original truth. I once met a saint in Zhongnan, pointing out that longevity is eternal and beautiful, and the jade stamen is new for 10,000 years. My whole body is speechless, and the earth is covered in dust and there is spring. My Tao has become a path. Not knowing a word is the most difficult. Suicai stood in front of the main door, lost in thought. Bai Xiaowen was about to speak, but he was stopped by Gu Xian. Young master, be quiet. Don't disturb master's epiphany. Although Bai Xiaowen felt that the poem was written with great interest, he could not get any serious epiphany. He could only look at Suicai standing there for a few hours. Finally, when the sun was setting, Suicai recovered from the state of being a clay statue. He shook his sleeves and bowed to the main door of the bronze palace. He said, thank you for your teachings, immortal master. I was too stubborn. Gu Xian was surprised. Why did master suddenly say this? Suicai said, the hidden armor heavenly book that I obtained is already very mysterious. It can be used as the foundation of Tao. After obtaining this immortal fate, I did not cultivate diligently. Instead, I searched for other Taoist classics. If this is not stubbornness, then what is? Chapter 1398. The three of them entered the Bronze Palace. There was only one palace. Although it was spacious, the furnishings were simple. There were stone tables and chairs, stone beds, pottery bowls, and other daily necessities. Moreover, although no one had lived in the palace for a long time, it was very clean and tidy. There was almost no dust. In a corner, there was a slightly tilted jade plate. On the edge of the tilted jade plate, there seemed to be a drop of dew. Below it, there was a bamboo tube filled with clear water. It seemed to be the dew that was collected from the jade plate. Swaci said, "This should be the dew-bearing plate. It is collected from the immortal dew. Drinking a mouthful is refreshing. For cultivators, it is enough to satisfy their hunger." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "I've heard of the phrase eating wind and drinking dew, but I didn't expect it to be true. Is this bamboo tube filled with immortal dew?" Swaci nodded slightly. "Since the three of us found this item, it is only right that we share it." After saying that, Swaci stepped forward and pulled out the wooden hairpin on his head. With a swipe, the clear dew in the bamboo tube flew out like a water dragon and split into 3 parts in the air, turning into 3 fist-sized water balls. Guxian quickly took out 3 water bags and stored the 3 water balls. Drip. After Swaci took away the dew from the bamboo tube, the dewdrop at the edge of the dew-bearing plate finally dripped down again and fell into the empty bamboo tube. The next dewdrop began the slow process of condensing again. It seemed that if the bamboo tube was full of dew, the dew in the dew-bearing plate would not drip down. He did not know how it worked. Guxian handed one of the water bags to Bai Xiaowen. "Young master, please accept it." Bai Xiaowen originally thought that this item was not a spoil of war and could not be brought out of the spiritual realm, so it was meaningless. However, after taking the water bag and looking at it, he was stunned. Dew, 30 drops special item. After drinking 1 drop, you do not need to eat for 1 day. At the same time, you will recover 100 points of energy, including but not limited to Yuanli, Do Qi, Gang Qi, Magic, etc. However, there was no indication that it could not be brought out of the 3 kingdoms. In other words, the spirit realm's laws recognized this as Bai Xiaowen's spoils of war, or a reward item. Bai Xiaowen was overjoyed. Of course, he took it without hesitation. It seemed that this Guangqingzi's abode was really quite special. When the god of death, Nigar, summoned Gloria, he was defeated. According to Bai Xiaowen's understanding, this place was probably already half detached from the 3 kingdoms. On the side wall of the Qinglupan, Bai Xiaowen saw 2 swords. For some reason, Bai Xiaowen felt a slight tremor in his heart when he looked at the 2 swords. He had an impulse to pick them up. Swaci exhorted, "That's the male and female swords, Master Immortal Guangqingzi's killing weapon. Just like the Luopa bell, it can't be used carelessly. Otherwise, you'll be harmed." Bai Xiaowen shuddered and immediately said, "But I heard that Master Immortal Guangqingzi uses a brick." Swaci smiled and shook his head. Then, he led the 2 onward. In the open space ahead, there was a purple futon. This purple futon is used for meditation. It's woven from purple calamus and can calm the soul, Swaci said. Bai Xiaowen's eyes lit up. Could this be the key to unlocking the jade slip? Sitting on the purple futon and looking at the jade slip with inner sight, we might be able to decipher it. Guxian nodded and said, "You're right, young master. I think we can give it a try. Among the 3 of us, Master has the highest cultivation. Why don't we ask Master to give it a try?" Swaci didn't refuse. He sat cross-legged on the purple futon, and a trace of tranquility appeared on his face. Swaci held the jade slip in his hand. After a while, he opened his eyes and shook his head. No. Guxian and Bai Xiaowen also sat on the futon and gave it a try. The futon really did have the effect of calming the soul. Sitting on it, all mortal thoughts seemed to dissipate. Unfortunately, both Guxian and Bai Xiaowen sat on the futon and looked at the jade slip with inner sight. They couldn't find anything. The jade slip was still blank. Suddenly, Swazi's voice sounded. Come here. It turned out that while the two were trying, Swazi had already toured the inside of the bronze palace. Swazi stood next to a slanted stone plate and said, in my opinion, this thing is the key to unlocking the jade slip's mystery. Bai Xiaowen looked at it. The slanted stone plate was engraved with symbols such as heavenly stems and earthly branches, the 12 stars, and so on. There was a long copper needle in the center, perpendicular to the surface of the stone plate. This is a sundial? Bai Xiaowen was considered knowledgeable. Swazi said, this isn't an ordinary sundial, but a rotating sundial. It can focus sunlight to project the contents of the jade slip and enlarge it. Then, we can use inner sight to look at it. We'll definitely succeed. Bai Xiaowen suddenly understood. According to Swazi's explanation, this rotating sundial was equivalent to a combination of a microscope and a projector. Of course, it was a unique product of Taoism and was equivalent to a spiritual artifact. It couldn't be compared to the ordinary microscopes and projectors on Earth. Then, how do we operate it? Bai Xiaowen asked. Swazi said, an immortal's treasure can't be driven by moral power. Fortunately, we obtained some items when we went through the river diagram array. They're just right for us to use. Swazi immediately took out 3 faintly glowing thin pieces. Guxian also took out 3 pieces. I also have these. Bai Xiaowen recognized them. They were the immortal crystal fragments found in the remains of the Yellowstone strongman in the river diagram array. After saying that, he also took out his 3 fragments. Swazi nodded and said, these 9 incomplete immortal crystals should be enough to drive the rotating sundial. However, the rotating sundial can only operate for a limited time, so we must seize this opportunity. Guxian and Bai Xiaowen both nodded to express their understanding. Swazi took the jade slip and the 9 immortal crystal fragments. He first put the 9 immortal crystal fragments into the grooves on the edge of the stone plate and then patted it hard. Buzz buzz buzz, the stone plate of the rotating sundial slowly rotated. A ray of light was projected from the top of the copper needle. Swazi held the jade slip and welcomed the ray of light. The ray of light directly penetrated the jade slip and projected on the dome of the palace, forming a large light screen. The 3 of them looked up to watch. Although they said they were watching, they actually closed their eyes and used inner sight to read the dome's light screen. Under Bai Xiaowen's inner sight, the dome's light screen was blurry at first, but then it gradually became clear with the outline of words. Finally, it focused into clear words. The first line from the right read, Great Void Scripture. The origin of heaven and earth is the origin of Qi. Bai Xiaowen didn't understand the true meaning of the scripture, but the feeling was similar to reading the Taiping scripture. When he read the words on the dome's light screen, there was always an inexplicable truth in his mind. It was as if the world was made up of visible threads, and he had a feeling that he could grasp the veins of the world. Chapter 1399. Swazi shouted, don't rush to comprehend it. Try to memorize it with your mind. Remember as much as you can. Bai Xiaowen's heart trembled. He didn't have the mental memory of an orthodox cultivator. However, Bai Xiaowen had a super brain. Using the inner vision technique, he quickly scanned the contents of the scripture like a camera and forcibly imprinted it in his mind. While the rotating dial was spinning, the 9 immortal crystal fragments embedded in the edge of the stone plate were also dissipating one by one. The 3 knew that immortal fate was hard to come by, so they tried their best to memorize it. After an unknown period of time, the rotating dial stopped spinning. The beam of light also slowly dissipated. The wordless jade slip in Swazi's hand also shattered. Bai Xiaowen was shocked. Why did the jade slip shatter? Sui said, it might be a sensing restriction set by a predecessor. The jade slip will self-destruct once it's been read. Why? Bai Xiaowen was puzzled. Guxian said, young master, you're not an orthodox cultivator, so you don't know. Immortal cultivation and the Tao are all about fate. Only those who are fated can be imparted the great Tao. The predecessor who imparted the jade slip certainly didn't want his jade slip to be read repeatedly. If he imparted it to many people, it would inevitably lead to a disaster. Although Bai Xiaowen felt that this explanation wasn't convincing, he didn't ask further since it was a fact. Sui said, I've memorized 4 layers of the scripture, but there might be some mistakes. What about you? Guxian said, this disciple is incompetent. I only managed to memorize 2 layers. Sui stroked his beard and smiled, this scripture's origin is mysterious, but it's indeed very useful. Memorizing 2 layers is not bad. It's enough for you to use for the rest of your life. The two looked at Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen didn't hide anything from Sui and Guxian. He said, I've memorized everything. Sui and Guxian both looked surprised. Sui asked, how did you remember it? Could it be that there's a more efficient way of memorizing than mental memory? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, I just forcibly memorized the content. There are a total of 9 levels to this scripture. Please take a seat, senior immortals. I will explain it to you. Bai Xiaowen closed his eyes. In his mind, the 9 levels of scripture were like 9 photographs, magnified in his mind. However, when Bai Xiaowen opened his mouth to recite the scripture, he felt that something had changed. He was clearly speaking the original text of the scripture, but it didn't have the feeling of the mysteries of heaven and earth hidden within it like before. It couldn't bring about any enlightenment. Bai Xiaowen opened his eyes and asked in astonishment, what's going on? Sui sighed, this is the result of fate. It can't be forced. Guxian also said, this is young master's opportunity. As assistants, we are already lucky to be able to learn the first few levels of the scripture. Bai Xiaowen frowned and thought for a while. He quickly understood. The key to this great void scripture was not the words of the scripture. The key was the Tao contained within the scripture itself. For example, Bai Xiaowen had already memorized the first volume of the 3 heavenly books, the Taiping scripture. Then, if Bai Xiaowen wrote down the words of the Taiping scripture, could his teammate Xiao Rui also learn the Taiping scripture and have special elemental energy skills? The answer was obviously no. Unless Xiao Rui learned the Taoist inner vision technique and read the first volume of the heavenly books himself, there was no way he could obtain special elemental energy skills. Of course, if Bai Xiaowen's cultivation reached a high level, he would naturally carry the Tao of the Taiping scripture in the process of writing or narrating the scripture. Then, he could pass it on to Xiao Rui. However, Sui and his disciple had gone through a lot of hardships to come here. They had even fought a fierce battle with the divine descendant creature. In the end, they had only obtained an incomplete scripture. Bai Xiaowen still felt that he owed them something. Sui saw through Bai Xiaowen's mentality and said with a smile, this humble Taoist appreciates your kindness, Emperor. However, you don't have to take it to heart. Do you still remember the poem at the entrance of the Immortal Master's palace? Bai Xiaowen recalled for a while and tried to say, you're full of words and can't speak the Tao. Sui smiled and nodded. He slowly recited, my Tao has become a path. Not knowing the word is the most difficult. The great void scripture is not my immortal fate. To be able to obtain 1 or 2 of it as a stone to supplement my Tao of the heavenly books is already a blessing. Then, Sui said, both of us will cultivate in seclusion in this immortal palace. There is hope for us to transcend. Bai Xiaowen asked, what will happen after transcending? The transcendence of the awakened was probably the completion of the great unification and the promotion to evolver. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen was more curious about whether the natives would transcend reincarnation. Sui shook his head and said, I don't know either. After transcending, perhaps we will follow in the footsteps of Master Immortal Guangqingzi and enter a whole new world. Bai Xiaowen frowned imperceptibly and asked, Immortal Zhua, can you estimate how long you will need to cultivate in seclusion before you can transcend? Zhuo said, the essence qi here is rich. 1 year of cultivation in seclusion is equivalent to 10 years of cultivation in the outside world. However, there are no rules to follow when it comes to achieving the Tao. This humble Taoist and my disciple are already very lucky to achieve the Tao. Of course, we can't be too hasty. Bai Xiaowen silently inquired. Does this immortal palace belong to the Three Kingdoms plane world? The laws of the spiritual realm quickly gave an answer. Guangqingzi's immortal palace belongs to an independent space. It is connected to the Three Kingdoms plane world through the river diagram array, but it does not belong to the Three Kingdoms plane world. In other words, the reconstruction of the Three Kingdoms plane world will not affect this place? Bai Xiaowen confirmed. The laws of the spiritual realm said, no, but it will cause the immortal palace to be completely sealed until the next reincarnation opens. Bai Xiaowen nodded. The reason why he asked this question was that he had a certain degree of confidence and grasped the basis of Guangqingzi's immortal palace as an independent space. The most obvious basis was 2 points. First, Bai Xiaowen, as an awakened, could directly obtain the jade dew of the Qinglu Pan. There was no prompt of cannot be taken out of the spiritual realm. Second, after killing death god Nigar, he directly obtained the mysterious mask and did not go through the lottery of the treasure chest. Logically speaking, it was not a spoil of war. These 2 points were enough to show that this immortal palace was no longer in the scope of the Three Kingdoms plane world. It was more like an independent space of treasure. Previously, when he killed the Yellowstone strongman in the river diagram array, the immortal crystal fragment obtained had a prompt of cannot be taken out, indicating that the foundation of the river diagram array was in the Three Kingdoms plane world. After figuring this out, Bai Xiaowen was no longer worried that Zhuo and his master would not be able to achieve Tao because of his great unification. Bai Xiaowen then bid farewell to the two of them. Guxian felt a little regretful and said, this place is an excellent place for cultivation. If young master can cultivate here, there will be hope for you to achieve Tao. It is a pity to abandon it. Zhuo reprimanded, what are you talking about? The emperor is the most powerful person in the world, and he is related to the country. If we abandon the world and cause the newly unified world to reignite the flames of war, you, I, and even the emperor will have to apologize to the world. Chapter 1400. After saying goodbye to Zhuo and Guxian, Bai Xiaowen returned to Crane Mountain in the Three Kingdoms plain through the river diagram array. This time, there were no Yellow Rock strongmen to stop him. Although there was still some time to stay in the Three Kingdoms plain, there was no need to be nostalgic. Generally, the Awakened would use this free exploration time to uncover some small side missions and earn some extra money. However, Bai Xiaowen was now the emperor of the Great Yan dynasty. Qiao Rui, Li Shi, Han Su, Cecilia, and other teammates had accumulated military merits and been conferred the title of Great General. Who would give them side missions? It was more likely that they would give side missions to other Awakened. They had left Earth for a long time. After the 5 of them met, they unanimously decided to return to Earth. Of course, they also brought along Bai Xiaowen's new follower. Jinmi Camille's team also returned after freeloading on the achievement of Great Unification. Although Camille used a special item to follow Bai Xiaowen into the Three Kingdoms plane, they were not the same team after all. Therefore, the two teams were not together in the checkout interface. Instead, they were counted separately. Under the starry sky, images were constantly flipping through like a picture album. Finally, the image stopped at the page where Bai Xiaowen ascended the throne and received the worship of hundreds of officials on the Zen receiving platform. Although the Taoist ancestral court was also considered a small side mission, it was not recorded by the spiritual realm's rules. Bai Xiaowen received a notification from the spiritual realm's rules. It has been detected that you completed the Great Unification process as the leader of the camp. You have obtained the right to choose your territory. You can carve out a piece of land in the area you've unified in the three kingdoms. It'll be your exclusive territory after you've evolved. After receiving this news, Bai Xiaowen's mind was set. This proved that he was at least a Lord-level awakened and could obtain Lord-level profession classics. Of course, in the Three Kingdoms plane world, he was the only leader of the camp and had ascended the throne. With such a great contribution to the Great Unification, it would be unreasonable if he was not a lord. A virtual map of the Three Kingdoms plane world appeared in front of Bai Xiaowen. Before drawing the map, Bai Xiaowen first inquired, "In the territory I draw, will the natives of the spiritual realm on it become my subjects?" The spiritual realm's rules indicated that he was thinking of Peach. Bai Xiaowen shrugged, "Well, I knew there was no such thing." If Bai Xiaowen could really make the natives of his territory become his subjects, then things would become much more serious. Bai Xiaowen would be able to take away a large number of native lords and make them his followers by demarcating his territory. From the looks of it, the territory that was drawn out was just a blank piece of land. The only difference was that there were no natives and there were no traces activities twos. Where the natives' was territory plane world, the difference was, the natives' the world were world. Where the was to the was the. There were s's was. That was not bad. The concentration of the natives' psionic particles in the Three Kingdoms plane was definitely the best in the awakened plane. The difficulty was there. Bai Xiaowen thought for a moment and tried to draw more than half of the entire Huaxia. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, "The area you drew is too large. Please shrink the area." Bai Xiaowen shrank a little. "The area you drew is too large." Bai Xiaowen shrank again. The area you drew. After more than 10 repetitions, Bai Xiaowen finally determined that the area of the territory he could draw was about the size of Jizhou. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, "You have drawn a territory. If you use the professional manuals of the Three Kingdoms plane world as a foundation and advance to an evolver, you will have this territory. Do you confirm?" Bai Xiaowen clicked cancel and then stared at the map in deep thought. "If you want to choose, it's best to choose an area rich in mineral resources and near the sea," Bai Xiaowen said. "I don't know what the world of evolvers is like. But when choosing a territory, try not to leave any shortcomings. It's even better if you have a certain advantage." His teammates looked at each other. "But we don't know where the mineral resources are the most abundant. Also, we don't know which mineral resources are the most useful in the world of evolvers," Qiao Rui said. Bai Xiaowen said, "In any case, gold, silver, copper, and iron mineral resources should be the most practical. According to the information in my head, Jiangxi's gold mines are ranked second in the country, and its silver mines are ranked first. In terms of copper mines, there is also a city known as the Copper City. Maybe there are fewer iron resources, but I think the first three are enough." Qiao Rui nodded and said, "The only pity is that Jiangxi is an inland area and not near the sea." Bai Xiaowen said, "But Jiangxi is densely covered by the water network and is closer to the Yangtze River. With the Yangtze River, it can make up for the shortcoming of not being near the sea to a certain extent. This is much better than other inland provinces." Li Shi said, "Then let's choose Jiangxi." "Ah, where is it from the Three Kingdoms period?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Jiangxi naturally corresponds to Jiangdong." He circled his finger and circled an area on the map of the Three Kingdoms plain. This area was partly Jingzhou and partly Yangzhou, including Zhejiang, Luling, Lingling, and other counties. Jinmi didn't understand. In her impression, this place was remote and backward. Even if it wasn't a barren land, it was rarely developed. However, she didn't like to participate in politics. Moreover, she didn't understand these things, so she could only learn slowly. After the territory was delineated, the Three Kingdoms plain began to reshape. The originally flat map of the Three Kingdoms quickly zoomed out and became three-dimensional. Then, it became a slightly rotating illusory sphere. Beams of white light shot out from the inside of the sphere. Everyone couldn't help but close their eyes. they felt that their eyes would be burned if they looked at the white light. Bai Xiaowen still used the Eye of Evolution to peek at the process of the Great Unification. As for the deduction notification from the spirit realm's rules, it was only a few hundred points, which was nothing to him. However, this time, the reshaping of the Three Kingdoms plane world didn't have an extremely condensed white light spot flying out like the Black Tide plane. The plane world of the Three Kingdoms shook frequently, and pieces of debris flew out. The largest piece was naturally the territory that Bai Xiaowen had delineated. Then, the shattered sphere reformed and began to reshape. In the void, beams of psionic particles were sucked into the sphere, as if to replenish the loss of the plane world. Finally, under the soft light, the sphere was restored. The familiar mountains, rivers, and geographical patterns came into view again. Bai Xiaowen could also see that the counties in Jingzhou and Yangzhou that he had delineated were also restored by the psionic particles. The spirit realm's law prompted, "You have obtained the qualification to be an evolved person in advance. Do you want to advance? You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."